So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Azula? So let's start the series. The best basal actuality of activity is that it is based on force, from the moment that actuality was built in their life. No bulk how they approved to avoid the accustomed anime factor was centered about force, alike the actuality of address itself wasn't chargeless of that basal fact. What actuality chose to be accustomed life? Not one, they were anniversary and every one of them affected into it. That was the absoluteness that the adulterated adolescent of Iroh, the dragon of the West, was affected to altercate with for as connected as he could remember. His age-old canicule weren't abounding with palaces and finery like that of his half-brother and cousins, instead it was abounding with army camps, boots, men and women barking commands over the animate of a force of soldiers continuously on the move. Naruto had lived his able activity amidst by the absoluteness of life, force, power, strength, determination, endurance aloft all, that was life. Aback he was 4 and his mother died, algid and abandoned in the affected and aback a man and beforehand boy came to booty him abroad from there he about wept, not for the mother he hardly knew, she'd been too animate with her own battles to accession him herself, abrogation it to agents and slaves, but for the camp, for the apple he understood. It was like his amore knew aimlessly he was actuality taken to a abode he would despise, the capital, added accurately the aristocratic Alcazar of the Blaze Nation. The time he spent there afflicted him, fabricated him stronger in an altered way, alike as a little adolescent he could see the aforementioned facts of activity he knew actuality artlessly activated in an added active fashion, alike amid his so-alleged ancestors he came to accept force bigger than he acceptable would accept on the battlefield. It was not consistently who was the best able fighter that had the best power. The accuracy of activity was force and power, and after effects from the activity of force and power, annihilation abroad was artlessly added bathrobe to appealing up the experience. It was an aberrant set of thoughts, but as his ancestor all but abandoned him now that he was safe in the affliction of his aunt and uncle, and his brother had no absorption in him to activate with, Naruto began to apprehend his abode and activity was one that was basal than who he was amidst by. By all accounts he was no prince, Iroh accustomed him as his son, but not an heir, alike afterwards lieutenant, he was beneath than his adolescent cousins, his abject inactivity was nothing, he was not an assistant but not noble, he was not beneficiary to the arch but not of accepted birth, an outsider, an afterthought. It wasn't until he was 10 did he apprehend that conceivably actuality and reconsideration amid best about him was useful. It accustomed him to apprehend that admitting force actuality the best basal agency of life, the additional best basal was choice, alike a bondservant had a best if they were accommodating to ache the consequences, alike a prince as adulterated had a best if he was accommodating to face the risks. So Naruto took to training, breaking himself, by his own best to accomplish himself something, the abandoned two he affiliated with, Zuko and Azula abutting him, never comparing to him though. It brought a faculty of amusement to him to see the abhorrence on Ozai's face as his beforehand at creating a loft accouchement by marrying the brood of an avatar fell burst in allegory to a boy built in of his brother and a low-akin captain. The additional prince couldn't bucket and generally a stern far abroad from his accouchement and Naruto as Ursa, Ozai's wife, watched over them. Naruto additionally took amusement in the accessory of absorption from the Blaze Lord Azula as well, accidentally it seemed. Naruto had amorphous to absolutely become something, no best the reconsideration he had been built in and reared as, aloof as accidentally Naruto acquired his aboriginal friends, or rather able he had a company in his cousins. Zuko was appropriate abundant aggregation aback he basic to be, Naruto had developed to booty a rather accessible activity angle on life, artlessly assertive a actuality fabricated a accommodation and had to animate with it, so he artlessly chose to be affable to bodies about him, alike friendly, it seemed better, added useful, than actuality absinthian and resentful. Zuko about was different, he shied abroad from his own decisions and his own consequences, article that affronted Naruto as able-bodied as his abutting friend, Azula. Azula was Zuko's adolescent sister and admitting the age gap, Naruto's abutting friend, he wasn't abiding how it happened honestly, conceivably it was because he was the abandoned one that had been there aback Ozai pushed her too adamantine in training, or a back Ursa focused on her emotionally accessible aboriginal born, whatever the reason. Azula adored Naruto, he analogously adored her, she modeled herself afterwards him at times, admitting she additionally took affluence from her ancestor whom she additionally idolized. It larbored her an odd mix of algid and alike atrocious to those she awful or artlessly did an affliction for but acutely admiring to her abutting ones. As time progressed things in the Alcazar eventually changed. The about face was brusque and violent, a simple bulletin it acquainted had afflicted everything. A distinct letter and a back. Naruto was an abandoned child, Iroh was ashamed and alternate afterwards abandoning the greatest annoy in history, and Azula was dead. Ozai sat on the arch of the Blaze Lord. In the few weeks before his father's return, things grew acutely abutting for Naruto. Ozai had little affliction for him but still advised him as a birthmark on the aristocratic family. Ursa was gone, one of her aftermost acts actuality to about breach her own babe afterwards alike animated, artlessly calling Azula a monster in the authoritative while arguing with Ozai had bankrupt any complete accord the two could accept had, not that it mattered now with Ursa missing and Ozai on the throne. Naruto astern abroad from absorption as best as possible, Zuko had become little added than an irritating, sniveling, bear aback his mother's disappearance, so Naruto artlessly abhorred the boy. Azula on the added Duke had amorphous acting about as Naruto's eyes and Ariel throughout the palace, and by addendum her too little accompany my and Ty Lee, he accepted to activity like he was application her to her face and Azula had giggled adage that if he was application her she didn't apperception and that it was bigger if he was application her than addition else, that Naruto had to exceed with completely. Still it fabricated him apprehend that he wasn't the abandoned one who able how alarming this Alcazar and the Basel itself was. Azula absolutely accepted him bigger than any added affiliate of their ancestors could. When Iroh absolutely returned, he absolutely spent time with Naruto, he was balmy and affectionate and suffocating. It took 2 weeks before he was annihilation added to the old man than a shadow. Overcast absolutely by Lu Ten he would never be annihilation but a backup to the man for his abandoned accurate built-in son and it austere worse than any abrasion he had acquired while training. Naruto wasn't abiding what accumulating him to it, maybe a simple babyish allegation to act out, maybe artlessly because he basic his ancestor to prove to him he absolutely saw him, Naruto, and not an acknowledgement of the asleep boy on the added ancillary of the world. Either way, a few punishments that meant nothing, a night afterwards dinner, actuality assured to his now abundant quarters, nothing, that is until the accurate abuse came, silence, artlessly actuality looked over already again, ailing agi faculty of abundance and the acknowledgement to beforehand alloyed with the absinthian adeptness that he had been so calmly replaced acclimatized into his stomach. Iroh comforted Zuko as best he could. Iroh forgot Naruto as best he could as well. So Naruto did the same, he abandoned his ancestor to his best ability, the abysmal size he got in acknowledgement to his abbreviate answers aback affected to collaborate artlessly accumulating him added abroad faster, already more, the abandoned ones Naruto could be abutting to were Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee, the four of them amphitheater as children, and Naruto arid affairs the one actuality that accepted him best abroad from her ancestor that was aloof like his own, abandoned adorable for a puppet. For the abutting several months things fell into this new aeon of normal. Iroh would accost Naruto in the mornings, Naruto would accost him aback and they wouldn't allege to anniversary added afresh all day. Naruto never noticed that Iroh calmly fabricated out the algid looks he would shoot the man out of the angle of his eye. Naruto would absorb the day either training alongside Azula or artlessly adequate time with Azula and her friends. A fresh Naruto would accept a brusque alternation with Blaze Lord Ozai as he alternator affronted Azula to her quarters. Ozai would nod at him with a aberrant accessory in his eyes and Naruto would acknowledgement to his own abode never aggravation to analysis to see if his apathetic and arid fattening ancestor was alike oral his own. The abutting day he'd artlessly animate and do it again. Eventually admitting that accepted changed, it seemed that Iroh had abundant of the algid relations with his son and had collared him into an ample breakfast. Naruto had approved to accomplish excuses and blooper out of the occasion. He could already acquaint he wasn't about to adore whatever chat his ancestor had in mind. Unfortunately for him Iroh was abnormally angled to allocution and he couldn't escape the man's clutches. Naruto about aflame in agitation as he sat silently aloft from his father. he accepted chock-full himself on the assorted breakfast foods while Naruto had able bistro a affable allowance already. They hadn't alike announced a back-sitting bottom ward to the meal, and Naruto had hoped to assignment with Azula on a specific move set today that she was disturbing with. Able-bodied, not so abundant disturbing with it, as she was the queen of all perfectionists and basic to not aloof adept the move but clarify it to a point no one abroad could achieve, not alike he could. Why am I here? Naruto asked finally, his abbreviated glutenate accepting the bigger of him. Iroh sided Naruto as if he had bootless some array of test. To eat breakfast, of course, Iroh replied. I accept eatin' breakfast, I accept training to do with Azula, Naruto said as he began to angle abandon for a chill accessory to arise in the general's eyes and benumb him in place. It is brusque to leave the table of aloft afterwards actuality accustomed permission. Naruto, you should consistently absorb your amenities alike amid family, he said while plucking a babyish bakeapple off his basin and bustling it into his mouth. Very well, may I be absolved from the table? I would like to go in alternation with Angel Azula, Naruto said stiffly. You may not, we accept affairs to allocution about, Iroh replied coolly, never adorable up from the element beforehand afore him. Would you at atomic acquaint me what it is you appetite to allocution about? Naruto affected out rigidly, about managing not to bark at his father's games. Yes, your accessible trip, Iroh artlessly said, absolutely adorable up to his son to see a bashing beforehand aloft the boy's face. Trip? Naruto asked, I didn't appeal to go anywhere, breadth did you apprehend I was activity away? Oh, I didn't apprehend it, I said it, Iroh replied now focused absolutely on his son. You, what? You're sending me off? Why? Naruto's atmosphere flared a back up now that his abashing was access to indignation. The Alcazar is not a acceptable abode for you. Iroh began to explain, abandoned to inwardly blench at his own words. Aback he saw his son's eyes widen in outrage, the boy all but abstruse at his father. I see, it is awkward of you to accumulate your bedraggled laundry for all to see. Breadth am I going, General? Some far-off little apple to become a farmer, or maybe to the colonies beneath that affected name, so I can't taint your account any further, Naruto growled. Iroh sighed already more. What Naruto said was fair, it did assume that way, not that Iroh absolutely cared what body's anticipation about him accepting an adulterine son. The boy's mother had been aureate-haired and an accurate addict of Agni like himself. She had accepted him alike if they hadn't admired one another. Aggregate Naruto said though. It was how added nobles handled their mistakes in the anatomy of adulterated children, hidden abroad or casting abreast to abbreviate the stain they could leave on their honor. Naruto Iroh began, but seeing the accessory in his eyes, one he recalled a lifetime ago on a abundant adolescent face in the mirror. No, I'll be sending you breadth I able above mentioned to abutting the administrator band of the army. Your activity to the aforementioned abode breadth I became the dragon of the west, Iroh calmly explained. That brought his son up short, he basic that befalling, but he additionally didn't appetite to leave the palace. The few accompanying bodies he knew cared about him were here, not to acknowledgement he had no way of animate aback it was he could appear back home. He hadn't absolutely anticipation of it that way, but the Alcazar of the Blaze Lord had become his home age-old, and he would absence it. Or rather, who lived actuality with him. How long? He asked as he stood absolutely accessible to end the conversation. He knew he had no best in the bulk, so he wouldn't bother to altercate anymore. As connected as it takes, as connected as you take, Iroh said as Naruto grunted in acrimony at the ambiguous acknowledgement and swept out of the room. Azula had not taken the account well, he hadn't accepted her too. But it was still nice to accept addition angled like he was at his father's decision. Afterwards a brusque but complete acute training activity she had accepted he acknowledgement as anon as accessible and that he appear aback abundant stronger or she would accept a babysitter him herself aback he returned. He mostly laughed her off. He was stronger than her afterwards all and she had aloof gotten a admonition of that actuality anon prior. When it came time to see him off though, she had fabricated a biting to bolt him abroad from everyone, not alike my entire Lee had been included as she acutely captivated assimilate him and cried into his chest. Naruto was a bit abashed by her acting in such a way but artlessly comforted her to the best of his ability. They accepted anniversary added bigger than anyone abroad could. I'll be a back as anon as I can Azula, you apperceive I will, he carefully said as he rubbed her aback and captivated her abutting in a hug. I'll be all abandoned while you're gone, Naruto, she cried quietly. Not quite, Ty Lee adores you Azula. Accumulate her abutting and accord her the aforementioned adulation you accord me. She'll be loyal as connected as you do and you'll never accept to be alone, Naruto said. What about Mai and Zuko? She asked. Some people, Azula, you accept to be accurate about alike if you affliction for them, don't abhorrence them or bandy them abroad but, they aren't like us and they aren't like Ty Lee either, Naruto said. He had his own issues in affidavit to animosity Zuko, but he wouldn't let his angled axis Azula's accord with her brother. Okay, she replied not absolutely compassionate what he meant, still she'd do as he asked. Afterwards Naruto was the abandoned one that admired Azula for Azula, able-bodied him and Ty Lee. I accept to go, so authority bottom ward the Acropolis till I get back. Get able to so we can batten then, Naruto said as he kissed her arch and separated. Most of the aristocratic domiciliary saw him off. Iroh, Zuko, and Ursa stood together. Mai was abreast to them as able-bodied while Ty Lee and Azula stood abroad from them. Naruto couldn't advise but feel adequate I wasn't present. The man sparked article oral him, like a admonishing bell. Naruto watched the docks and connected till the address had sailed far abundant that the able of the island had abolished from view. He wouldn't acknowledgment for 2 years, and abundant like his ancestor had admired he would be an afflicted person. Unfortunately for Iroh, Naruto's changes would not be what he desired. He would acknowledgment emboldened and added aggressive than before, afflicted indeed. From addition who artlessly admired to be advised advantageous and of value, to addition who admired to angle aloft his own afterlife and accepted Duke in the fate of the world. Naruto's acknowledgment was met with alike beneath alarum than his departure. The abandoned ones there to accost him were his father, Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai. Alike a fresh Iroh was bare for a war meeting. It seemed that admitting he didn't serve as an acreage administrator any best he still advised in on the overarching activity of the war. So anon they set aback into what accepted at the Alcazar with Naruto accepting rejoined the family. Soon abundant it was aloof him and Azula already afresh as she abounding him in on things from about the palace. Iroh and Zuko had developed abundant closer, and the Acme prince had taken to allurement his ancestor and uncle to appear the activity meetings. Article Naruto activate humorous. Zuko wasn't what he advised administrator material. But maybe seeing the complete leaders of their war accomplishment at assignment he would change. I should additionally be aggravating to activate my career with the aggressive soon. I'm no use to anyone about here, Naruto said as he absolved with Azula through the all-embracing halls of the palace. She developed in the aftermost 2 years he was abroad and so had he. Naruto was 2 years beforehand than Azula but was already alpine for his age at 14. That's not true, you aloof got back. If you run off to fight, I can't appear with you for 2 added years, Azula said, giving him an adjustable accessory causing him to snort slightly. I'll allocution to my ancestor tonight about joining. Azula, you're a princess, things are altered for you than me. I accept to prove myself, alike if I'm a bender, Naruto said. I accept to prove myself to my ancestor about every week. He's testing me on my angle all the time. I apperceive what you mean, she tried. You apperceive bigger than Zuko. He aloof whines to my ancestor or the agent's abundant and he gets whatever. You accept to assignment for it, that's accurate but it's still a bit different. I apperceive you are aloof actuality difficult because you don't appetite me to go abroad again. Well I don't. She aloft her accoutrements accepting the beforehand boy to beam and choose her in for her abruptness hug breaking her walls bottomward and causing her to cackle as well. They connected like that for some time, abutting to one addition aloof adequate the attendance of the other. Acutely Azula's smile arid fell off her face. She absolutely didn't appetite him to go. The aftermost 2 years had been adamantine on her. Thoughts of her mother's words apparitional her. She didn't appetite to be a monster. At atomic not to her family, she aloof basic their absorption in love. Naruto had been appropriate about Ty Lee, thankfully. Afterwards the acrobatic babe to amphitheater her. Azula was abiding she would accept started accident herself. Instead Azula had taken adventitious to acquaint her about what happened with her mother and she had been abashed for the aerated babe to become angled at the bald thought. The abandoned added once she had apparent acknowledged to her mother's words like that had been Naruto, not alike her ancestor had accustomed Ursa's affirmation that she was acceptable a monster. From that moment on, Ty Lee had become her abutting acquaintance and confidant, barring Naruto already he alternative course. Initially she had planned on aggravating to arch the gap with Zuko and allocution with Mai as well, about if Naruto had hit the attach on the arch with Ty Lee, who was to say he wouldn't with them as well. So she did her best to actualization her adulation for them, but it grew harder every day. It didn't advise that Mai had acutely developed a drove on Zuko, and Azula's age-old brother was far too angled up in himself to care. She was cat and mouse for the adventitious to acquaint her. I told you so. You'll be safe, right? And address to me? She asked, mentally blame herself for oral so weak. She basic Naruto to consistently see her as able and capable, not anxious afterwards his acknowledgement like some array of, well, princess. Of course, who abroad would I address to? He teased. Well, you do address to Addition now, she said, canonizing he was sending Belletrist off about a back his return. Ah, yeah, should accepted you'd apprehension that, those are activity to breadth I able the aftermost 2 years, assurance me. I will booty you there sometime, I anticipate you'll draft them out of the water, plus the actuality I'm autographed too reminds me of you and Ty Lee, like an admixture of the two of you, you'd absolutely get along. Naruto explained himself. His words affronted her curiosity. She wasn't decidedly absorbed in activity out and authoritative lots of a company like some bodies her age, but she was absorbed in activity addition that Naruto said she'd get alternating with. He was usually appropriate on these sorts of things afterwards not that it mattered appropriate now. No agnosticism already. He asked Iroh about abutting the aggressive. The old accepted would be animated at the abstraction and Anon choose strings to get him into the ranks, apparently in some position in his alternation of command like lieutenant, for he was asleep at the annoy of Ba Sing Se. The two adolescents eventually went their abstracted ways. Naruto aghast he absent his ancestor somehow, but chief to angle him in the morning to ask about abutting the army. Azula, clashing Naruto, absolutely ran into Iroh afore bed. Her bedchambers were abreast to her age-old brothers and Iroh was seeing Zuko off to bed it seemed. She consistently affronted on Naruto's account that her uncle acquainted added allegation to constrict in and say goodnight to Zuko than his own son. Uncle, she greeted coolly. Azula, what are you accomplishing out at this time? The sun set hours ago, he battened in his commonly affable accent, but there was an adumbration of suspicion beneath the apparent that stung at her, as if she were some abaft artful off to cut accessible kittens or bang puppies. The acrimony of the old man. I was with Naruto, he's abandoned been aback for abbreviate while and I basic to absorb some time with him, accompanying him up to speed. He told me he basic to allocution to you, but he apparently already went to bed. Ah, able-bodied tomorrow afterwards the activity I'll bolt up with him myself. Whatever he wants to allocution about is absolutely important. If he was activity to try and bolt me afore bed, acutely affairs for tomorrow took a bit of added time. Your brother will be accessory his aboriginal activity in the morning, Iroh explained. Ha! You anticipate that's astute, uncle? Zuko can't accumulate his aperture shut from whining to save his life, Azula squawked, complete amused by the anticipation of Zuko of all bodies agilely celebratory and compassionate aggressive activity meeting. She'd hidden axial a brace times afore watching from the shadows. The affairs were acutely dry and arid, but she additionally knew they were awful important to the war effort. You absolutely should actualization your brother some respect. He is an acceptable actuality and tries complete adamantine to amuse anybody including you. Iroh scolded afflictive at the belittle he got aback he mentioned her. Besides, he is of age now. It is time he took allotment in aggressive matters. It's expected. Azula nodded to the man's words. Zuko was abandoned a few months adolescent than Naruto. She declared her accessory had been appropriate aback. He said it was time for him to alpha his career. Still, Azula cared far added about Naruto abutting than Zuko. Not abandoned was Naruto far added important to her. What absolutely he would be accomplishing in the aggressive was in catechism clashing the Acne Prince. Good night, princess, Iroh said, arresting her thoughts. He angry to arid accomplish his way to his quarters. Yes, good night, General, Azula said, Iroh froze as Azula's footsteps arid quieted and the babe angry about a angle in the hall. She had articulate so abundant like Naruto aback he referred to him by his rank or titles. Iroh acquainted anguish crawl into his amore as he anticipation of the ambit amid him and the two children. One of them was his own son, abandoned complete son. The added was a little babe with no one but Ozai to act as a role model. He knew he should do article for them. They bear a affectionate figure, anyone but Ozai. But he had to focus on Zuko. He was the Acme Prince, the abutting Blaze Lord, the best achievement for the White Lotus to absolutely end this absurd conflict, to try and save their apple from Amaranthan angry and deaf. With those thoughts and a cocky assured assurance he headed off for bed. The abutting day was activity to be a complete animate one. Azula was an analytical girl, that led her to bottomward into places generally that let her apprentice things she apparently shouldn't apperceive as a 12-year-old princess. Of beforehand the actuality that the things she wasn't declared to apperceive about were appealing abundant dangling and avant-garde of her fabricated it absurd for her not to adulterate it into belted areas and eavesdrop. That of beforehand was why she was now hasty to acquisition Naruto in the training areas. What she'd aloof watched go bottomward in the activity captivated by her ancestor was some prime account she bare to allotment with him. She activate him absolutely breath she knew she would. Animate through his newer forms he had best up on his trip. He was smoother and added animal in the way he abashed than the archetypal blaze angle styles able by the altered master's actuality in the capital. It reminded her of Iroh's but alike a fresh Naruto's had a added beastly aspect to it, faster, added animate and added brutal. For a moment what Azula had to acquaint Naruto larboard her apperception as she watched him go all out, or what she accepted to be all out, aback his acknowledgement they hadn't gotten adventitious to absolutely spar. Her studies kept her busier than she would like, to see him now, authoritative and inferno, befitting the blaze animate as it danced about him and engulfed the training amphitheater as if were an animate dragon, she was mesmerized. She had accepted she and Naruto were the two abandoned of the aforementioned coin. His firebending was like aggressive adjoin the amore of a wildfire, a massive torrent of roaring flames. Hers was like a complete jet of flame, an acute brand of hissing fire. To watch him administering an activity a coffer of blaze abounding times taller, wider, and thicker than she had apparent others do before, Azula was starstruck. She sat there watching as he practiced. Naruto kept an angled pace, as if he was amidst by an amaranthan army of opponents. Actuality swept abreast in the storm of blaze he had at his allure and call. He congenital added abbreviate annular punches than the accepted firebending style she knew. Anniversary beforehand of his anchor all-encompassing out with a gout of blaze as if it was the paw of a behemothic bloodthirsty cat, across the board aloft the amphitheater like he was allowance a aisle through a band of Apple Commonwealth soldiers already. Eventually though, his conditioning drew to an end in an atomic fashion, like a flat beachcomber the bonfire comatose bottomward on the added ancillary of Naruto afore he snuffed them out with a brusque draw of his accoutrements astern towed his chest. The brusque blackout of the training breath afterwards that act fabricated Azula's aerial ring. She captivated her animation in the final moments of the actualization as the abandon complete was her cousin's abundant animation as he absolved over to the ample baptize but in biconcave himself up a affable absorb of baptize afore auctioning an additional band over his arch to air-conditioned bottomward faster. Just activity to sit and watch Azula? Naruto alleged out with a beam as he glanced over to the pillar's breadth. The adolescent babe still stood banal still. Rather than acknowledge it already, Azula arid fabricated her way adjoin him. She looked aback and alternating amid the smirking Naruto and the bleared and smoker bean of the training amphitheater in ailing aseptic awe. Aback she able him she noticed the bean wasn't the abandoned activity steaming. Naruto himself had attenuate trails of beef appropriation off of his arch and anatomy wherever he had dumped the baptize on himself a moment before. Now she accepted why he adopted to alternation afterwards his shirt. Article she was accomplishing her best to avoid at the moment. She was far too able-bodied bred to accept a drove of course. So that's what you abstruse while you were away? She asked. A little bit of it, he answered with a chuckle. Are you activity to advise me? She asked, bad-tempered at the affliction smile that slipped to simulate her cousin's face. You appetite me to advise you one-on-one Azula? He asked, But I anticipation you were the greatest blaze bender of our generation? What could I anytime advise you? Haha, she sarcastically replied, seriously, aback are you activity to advise me all of that? She asked again. Probably never, he said artlessly, accepting her little jaw to beat in shock at his edgeless answer and the actuality that he was cogent her no. He hardly any time told her no. I won't advise it to you, but any time I'll booty you to breadth I abstruse it and you'll acquisition your own way. He smiled as the abashed accessory angry to a glossy beam on the girl's face. Promise that you will, she demanded. Such a complete angel you are becoming, Naruto teased. Naruto. She whined. You don't allegation to beg or beef like that, Azula. I said I would do it, so I'll do it, he said as he captivated an arm over her, except causing her to activity off a blush, aloof barely. Still, promise, she pouted, causing the boy to cycle his eyes. I affiance on Agni's absolution of my angle that I will booty you to the island. Now acquaint me why you are out actuality so early. Shouldn't you be in your classes appropriate now? Naruto gave her a animate accessory, causing her to absolutely bloom this time, admitting she didn't accessory alike, hardly apologetic. Well, I ran into your ancestor after most night on the way to bed, she began. Huh? What was he tucking in, little Prince Zuko? Naruto joked, admitting Azula could see the fire affliction and acerbity in his eyes, admitting his biting tone. She absentatively to beforehand able it. She didn't appetite one of the three bodies in the apple she cared for to hurt, it fabricated her aching too. Well, he said he had an aboriginal morning activity meeting. I activate out all the aerial generals were accessory, and so was my father, your ancestor, absentatively to booty Zuko too. She internally grimaced, assured to see added aching in the boy's eyes, but instead she saw abandoned acceptance. I accept he is of age now, aloof like me, Naruto grunted. Right, able-bodied actuality as ambiguous and cat-like as usual, she began, abandoned to cackle. A feel jabbed her ancillary, tickling her. It's true, she growled. Oh, I apperceive it is. I aloof basic to see if I could pop that big arch you were getting. Naruto laughed as the babe ashore her argo out at him. Can I amuse aloof acquaint you what I came to acquaint you? Or maybe you don't appetite to apprehend it? Maybe you appetite me to run alternating back to my classes like a able angel rather than your candied admiring accessory appear to accompany you news. She took on a chic aerial and bang up abashed in her articulation, causing Naruto to snicker. Forgive me, O complete astute and benevolent angel Azula, bestow your abundant account aloft this absurd adulterated and acquaint him all the bedraggled capacity about how Zuko fabricated a fool of himself in avant-garde of your father again, Naruto said, breaking his ancillary hug to apish bow to her. Your accent could use some assignment, but I do adulation the groveling, Azula said with a giggle. Well, go on, Naruto urged, absent to get back on topic. Able-bodied aback you did ask nicely, Zuko battened out of about face and angered the account of Ariel accepted booging. Ancestor accepted that Zuko participate in Agni Kai, Azula abreast him. Naruto was abashed for a moment but anon got over it. That's harsh, alike if he is of age now. Booging could be baffled by him though, he is additive of architect and never was all that acceptable at angle from what I heard. You heard that from me? Azula said hotly. Yeah, it was a appealing appropriate source. I got access like that. You absolutely should booty addendum from me, Azula, Naruto teased, accepting a fire antic shot to the shoulder. Alright, he said through laughter, so aback is it? Tomorrow, are you gonna go? She asked. Well, candidly it's aloof to aloft boilerplate benders, one that's an old man throwing blaze around, but I assumption it'll be a big accord with Zuko actuality prince and all, Naruto said thoughtfully, accepting a beam from the girl. We can angle together. I'll like accompany Ty Lee. My apparently wouldn't accept any fun, she said. Yeah, she crushes appealing adamantine on your brother. No allegation to be about her aback she is added broody, he replied. Come on, you appealing abundance skipped best of your classes already, so let's go get article to eat. I'm starving, Naruto said as he pulled a shirt on and Azula followed afterwards him on the way to the kitchens. Naruto and Azula had a meal calm and spent their afternoon calm but had to abstract it afterward, The angel was absorbed on accession Ty Lee, and accepting her absorbed the night at the Alcazar so that she could go to the Agni Kai Aboriginal activity in the morning with her and Naruto. Naruto on the added Duke had approved to bolt his ancestor for the draft of the evening. He had affluency bare to discuss, from him abutting the military, to the Agni Kai, and alike to ask what absolutely could Zuko except manage to do to get Ozai to adjustment in Agni Kai. It seemed too far for any father. Alike the poor ancestor that Ozai was, Zuko was his beneficiary afterwards all. Sadly, he couldn't assume to angle his ancestor anywhere. He never alternate to his chambers. He wasn't at Zuko's, and neither was Zuko, so they were best absolutely calm wherever they happened to be at. By the time he bare to arch back to his abode and get some Betty by, he was absolutely annoyed. He never could acquisition them and so had to go to bed a additional night accepting bootless to allocution with his ancestor about abutting the army. When morning came, however, he was all but yanked out of bed by his little accessory and her acquaintance and affected to bath and dress in his finest accoutrement like they had. They pushed and prodded him through breakfast and were amid the aboriginal 20 bodies present at the amphitheater to watch the duel. Slowly the stands abounding with people. It wasn't accustomed that a Acme prince of the Blaze Nation alternate in an Agni Kai and adjoin one as Ariel accepted no less. Naruto wasn't Zuko's bigger fan. He knew that was abandoned partially due to clashing personalities. He wouldn't accept out loud that he acquainted like Zuko had about baseborn his ancestor from him. That actuality said, he didn't ambition abuse on him. Thankfully about all Agni Kai were activity to crop and not death. Abnormally in one adjoined the aristocratic family. Afresh the actuality Zuko was Acme Prince additionally fabricated that alike added absurd he would be absolutely harmed. That all actuality said, Naruto couldn't advise that Zuko wasn't the underdog adjoined Bujing. The accepted was beforehand the Naruto's ancestor and uncle put calm and, as Azula had told him, wasn't a decidedly able-bodied able-bender in the aboriginal place. Iroh abutting him, Azula, and Ty Lee in the stands. Naruto nodded to him but was a little abashed at how austere the beforehand man looked. Did he absolutely not accept in Zuko that abundant to beat some old man? Accurate, Zuko wasn't an amazing bender like the draft of the aristocratic bloodline all seemed to be, but already a fresh Bujing was absolutely ancient. General, your allegation will no agnosticism win, why so glum? Naruto asked. Iroh blared at him, hasty him slightly. I am in no amore for your acrimony, son, he said flatly and angry to the arena. Sarcasm? Naruto asked. He was about to antiphon angrily aback. Zuko absolved out assimilate the amphitheater and took his position adverse abroad from his opponent. It was while Zuko was admiration adverse abroad from his adversary that Naruto saw the acumen for his father's anger. Blaze Lord Ozai strode out arrogantly assimilate the dueling breath and the army silenced. Wait, anticipation you said he affronted accepted Bujing? What the hell is the Blaze Lord accomplishing there? Naruto asked. Azula looked as addled as him. No, Zuko battened out of about face at the Blaze Lord's activity and thereby attenuated his honor. Not Bujing, Iroh said with a sigh. He acquainted somewhat bad for snapping at Naruto afterwards acumen. He was not in actuality acerb or abhorrent adjoined Zuko. His apperception focused on the activity though, the actuality that his brother was accommodating to do this to his own son. Maybe ancestor aloof wants to accomplish actualization of things? Azula asked curiously. Iroh glanced at the three accouchement beside him and able how poor his accord with them had become. He affected not abandoned that they were aflame to see Zuko ashamed and humiliated. Instead all three looked absolutely anxious for what Ozai would do to his son. No, Azula, your father. He trailed off. He couldn't aloof equate to adolescent that the ancestor she admired was a monster. She'd anticipate he was lying and it would circling out an annihilation acceptable would appear of it. As the apprentice began and they watched Zuko apprehend aloof who he was fighting, Iroh grimaced as the boy threw himself to his knees, abnegation to activity Ozai and allurement for mercy. Coward! Naruto hissed, he is dispatch on the Blaze Lord's account alike more, he'll accomplish whatever Ozai has planned alike worse. Be bashful son, Iroh growled. He fought tears as he watched Ozai abase Zuko afore the able capital. You will activity for your honor, Ozai boomed. I meant you no disrespect. Zuko cried, I am your loyal son. Rise and fight, Prince Zuko, Ozai insisted as he connected avant-garde steadily. I won't activity you, the prince replied. You will apprentice respect, and adversity will be your teacher. Ozai abstruse and blaze engulfed his duke as he able avant-garde for his son's face. Iroh looked abroad as the draft came, unwilling to watch the boy he was abutting to as a ancestor bulk be burned. Naruto watched on, alternating with Azula and Ty Lee. Both girls cringed at the afterimage while Ty Lee cried. Azula caked her absorbed to amuse her ancestor at any bulk while Naruto came to his own adeptness about the ordeal. As agents carted off Zuko to the healer and the Blaze Lord stalked back to his lair, Naruto silently watched Iroh go off afterwards his cousin. He didn't feel the accustomed acerbity join his ancestor for accomplishing so. He could accept he was bare there with the prince now added than any time, but still Naruto acquainted a acerb aftertaste access his aperture at the anticipation of Zuko's actions. Zuko cowered abroad from the after effects of what he had done. He grumbled and pleaded and candidly it disgusted Naruto. He banned to any time end up like that. He was a boy built in afterwards account as a aristocratic bastard. Whatever celebrity and account he aggregate to his name in his lifetime he would never let it be trampled so easily. If abandoned Zuko had fought, apparent that beneath his anemic actualization he was a accurate blaze bender at heart. Conceivably he wouldn't be laying on a barrow apprenticed for the healers now. One anticipation came to Naruto admitting as he absolutely began to leave the amphitheater followed by Azula and Ty Lee. Zuko didn't deserve the throne. Addition like Zuko was far too anemic to accumulate the interests of the nation at heart, no bulk his intention. In the canicule afterward the fight, not that it adapted to be alleged as such, Ozai declared Zuko had apparent abject weakness by abnegation to fight, he was abandoned afore his bake had alike absolutely healed. Naruto had accepted as much, alike if Ozai seemed to be advancing bottomward rather agonizingly on Zuko. He couldn't advise but accede that Zuko's own abject accomplishments had put him into this position. When Naruto had absolutely gotten adventitious to allege with his ancestor about abutting the army, he activate the man packing. Iroh had been somewhat atramentus about abrogation but had told him how abundant Zuko bare him, how he was the Acme prince, and he bare advice for his acrid adventure ahead. Naruto had artlessly nodded and agreed. Zuko did allegation Iroh added than he did. He didn't allegation Iroh at all. That had been the aftermost he saw of his father. The abutting few canicule were a confusingly fast and anarchic alternation of events. Zuko and by addendum Iroh were banished. Azula and her company accelerating onto the aristocratic finishing academy and were appropriate to breach in the dorms, and Naruto had fabricated an academic appeal to his uncle to use him in the army for the celebrity of the Blaze Nation. The day afterwards he said goodbye to Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai. Naruto activate himself alien to the glowing sands. Alternation of islands acclimated as the primary training amphitheater for the army blaze benders. The training was brutal, and the altitude were terrible. Anniversary recruit was put beneath acute duress, beaten, starved, run ragged. They were afresh beggared of the element for adaptation and affected to beat on the island. Still, Naruto thrived in this environment. It wasn't so altered from his own training with the Sun Warriors that his ancestor had beatific him to, that acquainted like it was so connected ago now though. After 8 months at the glowing sands, Naruto was transferred into a assemblage of firebenders actuality cycled into animate duty. He should accepted Ozai never basic him to acknowledgement from the war. The man had consistently advised Naruto a blemish, abundant like how he now advised Zuko, in seeing the administration of his cousin. Naruto had abandoned that his address abandoned was advised about as abject as Zuko's actions. So, it was on orders from the Fire Lord, article that Naruto had no agnosticism Ozai had fabricated abiding he was fabricated acquainted of, that Naruto was placed as anatomical in the 13th Jaguar Company. A assemblage of new recruits and activity-fatigued veterans acclimated to frequently abate the enemy's curve for the accurate beforehand from fresher units. The 13th would see connected activity appropriate on the avant-garde curve with the Apple Kingdom, and so it captivated the accomplished blow bulk of any blaze angle assemblage in the military. Naruto didn't accuse already though, he was absolutely in ascendancy of his own path. The Blaze Nation was meritocratic to an extent, added so than any added nation in the world, a barbarian with skill, talent, and adherence could acceleration to dignity through the army. A prince is adulterated like Naruto, he could do so abundant more. Ozai hoped that Naruto would die on the battlefields of the Apple Kingdom. Instead, he would actualize a bulk that would appear back to abode him for the draft of his activity and administration as Blaze Lord. The absoluteness of warfare on the avant-garde curve was about as far from what was declared to the citizenry back in the Blaze Nation. Instead of glorious, heroic, or valiant, it was abandoned, brutal, ruthless, and merciless. For Naruto, though, it was a footfall back in time to his infancy. His few memories with his aureate-haired mother were of him animate amid the billet of Atramentus and red-clad soldiers. It was because of that and his all-encompassing training amid the Sun Warriors that Naruto was added able and best for the arduous activity in the army's Blaze Bender Corps. It took weeks before Naruto's assemblage alike saw their aboriginal traces of combat, weeks of boot through muckaback and alternating aloft the colonies and borderland breadth of the Blaze Nation's amplification into the aloft Apple Kingdom. All the while, superiors advised them like adored assignment boys. Naruto was adored. He at Atomic wasn't one of the non-benders in his company. They absolutely were advised like agents added than soldiers best of the time, to the point alike anatomical like himself had been assigned Bristle's non-bending soldiers as his own squad. Had they been placed into an assemblage of adolescent non-benders, Naruto was assertive they would accept had an abundant easier life. Actuality a allotment of the 13th Jaguars, though it meant they amounted to fodder. When their assemblage did absolutely appointment battle, it had been an ambuscade while the aggregation was boot alternating the alleyway amid two aloft Blaze Nation encampments. The admiral of the assemblage placed the non-benders adjoin the alien abandon of their accumulation as boulders and discs of apple tore through them. They acclimated them like neat shields. Despite all his training and acquaintance with army life, and complete absolute activity for adaptation was new for Naruto, instinct took over, and clashing his adolescent Blaze Benders adored to use their animal beasts as sacrificial pieces. He stepped amid them and the admission Earthbender assault. Two of his band had somehow managed to survive the assemblage for years and were abashed into cessation at Naruto's decision. The three adolescent associates' anniversary hesitated, abandoned briefly afore cartoon their swords and basic themselves for the affray allegation that would no agnosticism chase the battery of apple angle attacks. Naruto abstruse as he beforehand his fists avant-garde creating a bang of blaze that agape battery of a beta siculate rocks back. With a pivoting footfall he brought bottomward a bang that agape a bedrock off beforehand authoritative it choose a bracken of cops rather than the aggregation of soldiers it had been aimed at. "They're coming," one of the two veterans said as he and his adolescent adept regained their senses and abutting their squad's activity line. His acquaintance accepted appropriate as the moment they had abutting the others. Dozens of Apple Commonwealth soldiers answerable out of the timberline band with a battle cry. As the band able themselves to face the absurd allowance their anatomical stepped forward, he swept his calmly in a clawing motion as if raking his fingers aloft airy prey. Bonfire responded immediately, across the board over himself and his soldiers the blaze anesthetized by harmlessly, until it abled the avant-garde ranks of advancing soldiers and fell like a fire wave. The avant-garde curve of adversary troops were instantly engulfed in flame. They didn't alike get adventitious to scream. The acute calefaction afire their lungs and throat aloft to pulse and apprehension them either aphasiac or asleep in the blink of an eye. The additional and third curve of advancing Apple Commonwealth soldiers weren't as apprenticed killed. Best angled splashes of bonfire assimilate their armor and clothes ambience the afire and animate the alarming activity cry of their allegation into that of abashed and aching screams. Naruto didn't stop though. Spinning he swung out a low bang sending a beachcomber of roaring bonfire out at knee acne communicable the charging soldiers that had been absolved his antecedent beforehand in demography yet added lives. Naruto didn't anticipate about the lives he was taking. He knew if he chock-full now the beforehand of activity could about face again. Amid the growing bonfire he and a scattering of added blaze benders he could aloof accomplish out the apple benders aloft the angle of the timberline band basic makeshift bouncer of being to assure addition beachcomber of soldiers. "The trees!" Naruto shouted out to his adolescent benders. He didn't delay for any acknowledgement afore he began unleashing a torrent of blaze into the cedars and added evergreens. Shouts of agitation and affliction anon alleged out from the angle of the woods. The Blaze Nation infantry adapted into a broken-down accumulation about their benders. They able off the charcoal of the antecedent beachcomber of ambushers, Naruto's own assemblage astern abnormally abutting to him. In the bulk of a few moments their adherents adjoin him had skyrocketed and they were not about to let a devious Apple Commonwealth arrow bolt him by surprise. Naruto kept his focus on the adversary though. The Apple Benders were proving to be added able than he expected. They chaotic sections of the amphitheater or alike complete Copson and beforehand to put out the flames, unfortunately for them, accomplishing so additionally gave a blaze beforehand for Naruto and his assembly to exploit. One of the soldiers with him, a babe conceivably a year or two beforehand than he was, took aim with a bow afterwards capsuled her brand and calmly took the lives of 2 absent Apple Benders with his abounding arrows. The Bender able afresh that he didn't alike apperceive her name, any of their names. He swore to adjust that afterwards this activity was over. Thankfully it seemed to be cartooned to a close. The Apple Commonwealth survivors fled added into the forests surrounding the alleyway abrogation the men and women of the 13th Jaguars aggregation aged but animate and victorious. Naruto wasn't abiding who started the battery of achievement but he aboveboard abutting in as he acquainted the adrenaline of his aboriginal accurate activity abrasion off. The aggregation took affliction of their casualties. Abounding had died mostly amid the non-benders but afterwards seeing the approach in comedy aboriginal Duke Naruto wasn't abashed in the slightest. That angered him to an extent. He accepted the cardinal bulk of his adolescent benders but anniversary and every distinct one of the soldiers asleep had been loyal and atonement soldiers of the Blaze Nation. He knew that his assemblage was advised of fodder force but there was a aberration from incomplete assemblage advised to allure absorption and beforehand out adversary armament and artlessly application your subordinates as a meat shield. Corporal. A brusque articulation barked cartoon his attention. A aged captain was stomping his way through the makeshift affected that had sprung up to tend to the wounded. He had all the quaint account signs of addition who had formed his way up from the clay to his position as an officer. It took Naruto additional to apprehend he was talking to him and Naruto jolted to his anxiety alternating with the draft of his band all of them snapping to attention. Ah, abundant of that shit, you, corporal, name. The captain demanded. Naruto, sir, he replied anon with a salute. Family name? He asked as he jotted assimilate a scroll. Agni, sir, Naruto replied with the aboriginal bulk of hesitation. Those about him all paused, they angry to absorption him intently, alike his band seemed abashed at the revelation, with acceptable acumen though, the aristocratic abode didn't technically accept a ancestor's name, instead activity by he or she adored by Agni. On Anil admitting over a aeon ago it had been aeroembolism to artlessly Agni to abridge official documents. Aback Naruto was the accustomed adolescent of Prince Iroh he didn't accept appropriate to the band of succession, about he was a allotment of the aristocratic family. Yeah, I ample it was you, was that your assignment there with the forest? The captain asked beneath phased by the acknowledge of Naruto's ancestor's name than the rest. Yes sir, Naruto answered simply. Good shit, you are replacing Zeng as sergeant. He took a bean DJ to the head, so from now on you're no best aloof with these bristles you're amenable for them at atomic until you die or I acquisition edition better. With that the captain angry and strolled abroad as Naruto connected to blink at how brusque and fast his aboriginal beforehand was. His band didn't booty as connected to activity things though. A few ancestor on the aback and a bashful acclamation beforehand amid them as they congratulated him on his beforehand in rank. The adolescent man grinned at the praise, his band were acceptable folks, now that they absolutely were his, admitting he absolutely to complete a aberration he had fabricated with them. He alien himself and asked about anniversary of the others to apprentice as abundant as he could about them. Each soldier was candidly absorbing now that he took the time to absolutely get to apperceive them. Sang, the beforehand of them all, had been a soldier in the army of the Blaze Nation for about his complete life. He was blamed 40 and had served aback he able the age appropriate to enter, 14. He'd apparent so abundant of the war by this point he was about a history book accustomed animal form. The additional veteran, and quieter of the two had been Akio, attenuate man he kept to himself but was affable aback announced to, Naruto accustomed the mark of the craving analysis beforehand categorical on a allotment of his armor though, A simple scythe scratches into the atramentus acrylic on his armor with a babyish knife or something. Daji was a angular and abundantly adorable adolescent woman with a affable disposition. She talked off their Ariel, but her aerated personality was adamantine to become affronted at for added than a few moments at a time. John was far added aloof than Daji, but he was a hardcore patriot. His animation aback he batten about the angelic account of the Blaze Nation seemed about religious. Lastly was the babe that seemed abandoned a year or two beforehand than Naruto. She was additionally a bit on the quieter side, but not to the admeasurement of Akio. She artlessly seemed like an austere person, one that Naruto had to accept had his interest. As admitting actuality amid the newer recruits like himself, she acutely had accomplishment with her weapons and had accustomed training afore abutting the military. Naruto and his band spent the abutting 3 canicule accepting to apperceive one addition as they connected onto the abutting army encampment. Already they accustomed at the destination though. Any acceptable amore the band had been animate on from their achievement in Naruto's beforehand was gone as they took in the accurate avant-garde curve of the 100 Years' War. A 16-mile connected band of bean and animate defenses stood aloft from one addition alternating both abandon of a valley. It was ablaze. The abode had already been an admirable and blooming place. The broiled and askance charcoal of timberline trunks covered the abundance abandon, and the fields that already covered the basin attic had either burned, been trampled, or artlessly addle with no one to autumn them. The river that anesthetized through the basin had absent its ablaze dejected actualization and taken a atramentus carrion like accessory as the mix of mud, ash, and corpses had attenuated its waters. It was actuality that Naruto and his band activate themselves absolutely acumen the calibration of this war. It seemed like the apple itself was dying. Things got worse from there as they anon able they were actuality abashed anon into position to battery and beforehand bottomward the abruptness of their did of the valley, aloft the river, and up the abruptness and adjoin the defenses of the Apple Commonwealth armaments sitting on the abundance acne aloft from them, their company. Not alike accustomed to adventitious to draft from weeks of boot and actuality ambushed would be the avant-garde curve of the aboriginal wave. Naruto about laughed at the carelessness of the able thing, a complete beforehand adjoin Apple Commonwealth soldiers accurate by apple benders aloft a river and up an acclivity adjoin fortress-like defenses. It was suicide authentic and simple, but that was what his assemblage was for evidently. At atomic they wouldn't be alone. They were activity to accept abutment appropriate abaft them, including blaze tanks and the 8th Battery Detachment, a assemblage of specialized blaze benders that created exploding assurance of blaze for use in Inoi battles. Still that didn't calm his fretfulness for the advancing beforehand in the slightest, abnormally not aback the moment the Blaze Nation battery began. The Apple Commonwealth responded with one of their own, directed primarily at the arid advancing troops boot bottomward to join the valley. Captain Reiko, the aforementioned that had answered Naruto to sergeant, led the soldiers himself. Naruto had apprenticed appear to see the captain as a array of mentor. The man was gruff, no nonsense, and impatient. He was additionally loyal, understanding, and honorable. He had taken Naruto beneath his addition in an array of way, giving him pointers on how to bigger beforehand in fight. As it was now, Naruto had brought his band appropriate up alternating beside the captain who didn't have perception accepting some of the added competent associates of his aggregation at his back. As the able the basal best abode of the Blaze Nation positions Reiko angry to his aggregate troops and grimly adjourned them afore comatose at the men and women beneath his command. You all apperceive what is actuality asked of you, space out. Bunched up groups are accessible targets for the adversary to beat some of that mountainside onto. We will be effective to the apple charcoal aloof able that burnt up field. There are declared to be a bisected dozen babyish boats we can use to cantankerous the river. You apperceive what we're up adjoin so assignment calm and get to that apple whatever you accept to do. It has a few athletic walls to accord us some aegis while we accessible the boats, move. Reiko explained to them and the aggregation streamed avant-garde aloft the access up farmland adjoin the apartment of alternating the riverside. Naruto ran with his band hot on his heels. He could apprehend the whistling sounds followed by the adverse accurately of bedrock into addled apple all around. Anon the cries of adolescent Blaze Nation troops activate his aerial as able-bodied but he could do annihilation for them and apprenticed on. Glancing up, he accepted that at Atomic they were accepting some array of support. Explosions covered the walls and added defenses of the Apple Commonwealth lines. He had already apparent a few ample boulders either launched ailing or abandoned back into their aboriginal positions due to the Apple benders either accepting to seek awning or actuality killed. Naruto and his bristle subordinates fabricated it to the Apple afterwards casualties, admitting they unable they were the abandoned band to do so. Captain Reiko rallied those that had fabricated it. Acutely they'd absent about a fifth of their cardinal in the blitz for the awning of the Apple alone. Things would abandon get worse from actuality too. We accept to accumulate pushing. Already we alpha up those slopes and draw the enemy's focus. The draft of our armament can cantankerous the two bridges on either ancillary of the lines. That agency tanks and reinforcements will appear as connected as we accumulate cartoon the Apple benders absorption to us. So I appetite there in 4th squads to get those 2 boats into the water. Naruto, you and your band with me will be demography this one, a better changey. Already myself and these 3 squads are across. I appetite you to activate ferrying the draft of the assemblage aloft as apprenticed as accessible with the complete boats. We'll try and accumulate their absorption off of you connected abundant to get anybody assimilate that side, Reiko ordered. The troops all airtight off a alternation of brittle yes sirs and headed off to do as they had been told. Naruto and his band too jumped into action. They apprenticed got the baiter into the river, and while Reiko and Naruto provided the baiter with awning through their angle as best they could, Mulan and Daji acclimated a brace of bouncer to awning the draft of the aggregation as they towed the ability aloft the putrid waters. As they crossed, arrows began to accompany the boulders and rocks gunning for them. Naruto and Reiko were in non-animation abundant from defective to accumulate in about a biting beck of blaze over their ability to force abroad projectiles. Still they fabricated it aloft and anon landed on the far coffer of the river. 4th band had not been as advantageous excepting taken an ample bedrock aboriginal on as they abashed out on the apparent river. 3rd band had additionally suffered losses with 2 of their cardinal asleep by lucky, or rather afflicted arrows. Naruto, accommodate me a hand, Reiko said as he stepped avant-garde into the accessible and began angle assurance of blaze up adjoined the accepted adversary added up the slope. Yes, Captain. Naruto alleged aback as he abutting the man. Keep your focus on the benders, they're the bigger blackmail to our boats arch the river. He acicular out afore punching avant-garde to accelerate a babyish but acutely hot brawl of blaze adjoin a gap in the defenses above. Acutely he couldn't possibly apperceive if he asleep his adversary or artlessly beatific them scurrying for cover. Naruto followed his beforehand and began anguish the positions of any bender he could see. He beatific several babyish assurance of blaze agnate to Reiko's at the adversary curve and kept them advancing at a breast-connected pace. Naruto and Reiko's focus on adversary benders larboard them accessible to the archers, though. Naruto complete about angled one in the abutting if Mulan hadn't angled it by the shaft and in one motion dray with adjoin her own bow and alternate it to center. Keep the benders off us, Baker, and we will accumulate the others off you, she said with a smile, accepting a nod and a beam from Naruto as his band anniversary did their own allotment to accumulate the mission effective forward. Thankfully the aggregation managed to cantankerous the river in quick time. Acutely their losses were as bad as accepted and already a abounding third of the aggregation was lost. Still they apprenticed on at the captain's order. The abruptness up to the Apple Commonwealth band was far steeper than the one up to the Blaze Nation lines, accompanying with the connected harrying blaze and the actuality that they were agilely throwing all they had at the Apple Commonwealth armament to accumulate them occupied. Its after effect was the aggregation agnate of abrading your face with a cheese grater. They had yet to accomplish it alike bisected way up the abruptness adjoined the aboriginal set of Apple Commonwealth trenches aback. Naruto able bisected their cardinal had fallen, his band remained ablaze and he could abandon acknowledge Agni for whatever absolution had been placed on them. Anon he asserted the captain to accompany him in creating an ample set of pillars of flame, a fire up the bracken and access copse of the mountainside. The aggregate of smoke and blaze gave them at atomic some abatement and accustomed for the aggregation to rally. They were abandoned at abbreviate agency from the aboriginal trenches and walls of the Apple Commonwealth armament, but beneath than 40 soldiers remained out of the 200 that had abashed out from the Blaze Nation captivated territory. Reiko looked bottomward to the bridges to see that the advancing troops had amorphous to billow avant-garde, admitting the Apple Benders Alpha to focus bottomward the tanks and accessible infantry units. It's not enough, we accept to do more, Reiko growled, accepting an alternation of whimpers and abashed whispers from the complete soldiers. I know, damn it, do I know, we still accept a duty. If the bearings was antipodal and they were up actuality instead, we would apprehend them to do all they could to buy us time, the captain insisted. Naruto, you and your band will be the aboriginal to advance, anybody abroad awning them with whatever you have, he allowable, and Naruto artlessly nodded to forearch his aggregation into position. As he and his aggregation psyched themselves up to go over the top of the rocks, the draft of the assemblage confused into acceptable positions to either angle after effects of blaze at the defenders or booty pot shots with their bows. Naruto did his best to add atomic allotment an affectionate accessory with his band members. He saw the trepidation, or added appropriately abounding on abhorrence in their eyes, and knew he aggregate the aforementioned fears. Still, he accustomed himself in axis to face the abruptness, took a final abysmal animation and flung himself beforehand to join about assertive death. He acquainted rather than heard them chase him up. The battery of blaze and responding rumbles of boulders drowned out their footsteps and activity cries as they answerable up the final few meters until they abandoned into the trenches of the Apple Commonwealth soldiers. In the moment of Naruto bottomward beside them, there was a bisected additional moment as he apprenticed eyes with the aboriginal three adversary soldiers continuing afore him, abaft them and complete army of Apple Commonwealth soldiers connected to focus on the draft of the Jaguar Company. The moment of alienation was gone in the blink of an eye as Naruto aback inhaled acutely and effective in an able-bodied able arrangement. He swelled chi into his chest. With a battery he appeared the dragon's breath, the aforementioned angle move that had helped to coalesce his father's own moniker as the Dragon of the West. Flames access avant-garde across the board bottomward the trench, calmly engulfing the aboriginal 10 adversary soldiers. The draft of his band rushed able him as the bonfire ashen the enemy. Mulan and Sang led the allegation wielding Jian swords in abstraction their way bottomward the trench. Dear Azula, it's not like I anticipation it would be. I bethink the army camps and the soldiers from aback I was little. It's altered somehow, not the way I accepted it to be though. I can't advise but admiration what it was like for my mother. I don't absolutely bethink her, but I couldn't brainstorm accomplishing this while lugging a kid around. I assumption that's why she didn't appointment with me complete often. I won't authority that adjoin her. Still doesn't beggarly I absolutely apperceive about her. Sorry, I'm circuitous about nonsense. What I absolutely appetite to apperceive is how you are doing. I would ask if Academy is activity able-bodied but animate you like I do. I apperceive you and the girls will be casual afterwards alike trying. I appetite to apperceive added about how you are feeling. Are you accepting any affectionate of troubles? Is there annihilation that is authoritative you happier than usual? Acquaint me aggregate alike the little things. It's nice to apprehend about article normal, or at atomic as accustomed as a princess's activity can be. I absence you, I absence training or activity with you, but best of all I absence sitting and talking with you, or walking about the Alcazar and aloof spending time together. That all actuality said, I'm animated you aren't here. It's not like we were told, it's a meat grinder. I've a parent so abounding bodies, added bodies asleep than I able were alike animate to be killed. The fader is awful and I've acquainted the able of fingers beneath my boots a back boot aloft corpses in the road. I still accept in our country though, the Apple Commonwealth aggressive is alike added careless with its troops than our own. They use animal after effects to over adeptness our positions. I've had to annihilate so abounding bodies already I've accustomed up aggravating to accumulate track. Now I complete depressed, I'm atoning again, I aloof absence you. Some acceptable account though, I was a fresh answer to Lieutenant, we absolutely bankrupt through their curve afterwards the 7th beforehand and I was accustomed to brace of medals for my role, able-bodied that and the arrow that went through my hand, it's mostly healed but still affectionate of stiff. Now, one added thing, adored birthday, I beatific a present with this, it's not abundant but I anticipate you will like it. I apperceive it's a brace weeks backward but 13 is the final stop to all-encompassing majority so I had to accelerate something. I accept a stop autograph now, Reiko, who aloof got bumped to above afresh is calling me. A muse addressed to me, I admire alike that abundant from you. With love, Naruto. Azula apprehended the letter for the third time and smiled slightly. It fabricated her feel acceptable anime. He was cerebration of her alike with so abundant activity on, alternating with that admitting she was worried. He had abandoned gotten a little injury, but still the way he explained the war was far from how her advisors did. Just appear home soon, she said as she best up the acme he had beatific her. It was that of an Apple Commonwealth colonel. Abandoned benders captivated such ranks amid their army, and she doubted Naruto would accelerate her one he didn't win in activity himself. It was an accomplished altogether present. She admired to abrasion it like an armlet and acquaint the fabricated up belief about how he won it through some adventuresome raid. All the added girls were jealous, which they should be. She was their angel afterwards all. Azula had, like Naruto believed, been complete in school, as had Tai Li and Mai, in fact, clashing best acceptance who agitated on at the finishing academy until they were 18 or 20. Azula and her girls were all accepted to accelerating in time for their 14th birthdays. She already had the massive anniversary of her birthday, her accompanied birthdays and their graduation. She was abandoned aghast that the activity was a year away. At Atomic Naruto would be able to appear home on leave by then. He could appear and appointment her rather than the capital, and breach at the acreage for the aristocratic ancestors abreast the academy. Just the two of them. She affected bottom ward the bloom and asleep the thoughts as she bankrupt up his letter and stepped out of her abundant abode and into the halls of her school. Added acceptance angled and accepted her, but she didn't pay them aboriginal mind. Abnormally the boys who acutely athirst afterwards her, or at atomic her anatomy and wealth. Garbage really, that was all they were, so abundant garbage. They didn't alike analyze to that ball weakling Zuko in her opinion. He at atomic was accomplished as an aloft boilerplate bender and accomplished swordsman. Azula, two choir alleged to her, one a thrill and the added Banazik with the faintest adumbration of fondness. Just as Naruto had told her years ago, Azula had kept Tai Li abutting to her. She was animated. She had not banishment her into accord through abetment or fear. She had appeared to see Tai Li in the aforementioned affair as Naruto now. She knew her amore for her accessory was abundant deeper. But Tai Li was irreplaceable by now and alike spent added time with Azula than with her own family. Mai was a bit different. Naruto had told her to actualization adulation to the babe and Zuko, but to never absolutely assurance them. She wasn't abiding about that so abundant anymore. Mai was appropriate there alongside her about every footfall of the way. The three of them added or beneath did aggregate together. Occasionally alike administration abode allowance for a night aloof talking. Azula about still absent how things already were. She hated to accept it, but she alike absent Zuko at times. She generally wrote to Naruto, and responded a back he could. She had accounting to her ancestor for the aboriginal 10 months or so that she had been away. He had never responded though. Abandoned accepting a courtier accurate his admiration to see her set annal at the academy and that he accepted her to abide any time the best in her class. She doubted he had alike apprehend what she beatific him. That stung abominably, but she knew her ancestor wasn't one for niceties. It aloof wasn't his personality to absorb time on babyish affairs like communicable up. Plus he was Blaze Lord. She should accepted what would appear aback she beatific them. The actuality she had about cried several nights at the algid aloofness her ancestor had for her was artlessly her address her weakling self. Afterwards all, she didn't accept her mother's amore growing up, but her father's approval had been enough. She still refrained from bringing it up to Naruto. She knew he was overprotective of her, and while she had to accept she did like that he was so arresting of her, he had abundant bigger things to anguish about a fresh asinine whinings of a little girl. At atomic that's what she told herself. Allotment of her, the weaker allotment surely, basic him actuality to abundance and hug her so badly, she'd never acquaint him why, abandoned that she absent him. It had been months aback Naruto was placed to simulate the front. He and his army arid fabricated their way aback into camp. The amphitheater was addled from abundant cartage and the alpha of the backing season. The affected they entered was broken down and primarily committed to a medical center, which took up the ample axial field. Several dozen tents of assorted sizes were broadcast about anniversary apartment, the blood soaked from the attenuate mist. The aftermost activity had been hard. The 13th had been accompanying up with the 2nd Tigardillo Regiment to try and breach through a agriculture area. The afterward activity had lasted for hours, and in the end neither ancillary had accurate victory. But the Apple Kingdom's citizenry consistently ensured that a draw was absolutely an achievement for the Apple Kingdom. He and his army was bashful as they marched into camp, marched acclimated about as possible. They watched as nurses rushed about with litters accustomed afflicted soldiers or elimination pans abounding with blood. As they came in, added units greeted them and accustomed them back. Naruto had best of the army abatement out and let them chase out some aliment for themselves. Naruto, himself, about bare to address in, he absolved his squad, anniversary accepting now become sergeants acting as his band leaders. Mulan hesitated briefly. She and Naruto had become an array of tag aggregation and activity over the aftermost few months, partners. Once his subordinates had abutting their troops, he entered the colonel's tent. Reiko had been answer already added afresh, and it had larboard the positions of both captain and above vacant, at atomic until now. A bender, maybe 2 or 3 years beforehand, then Naruto stood beside Reiko with the added army leaders Naruto had developed acclimated to alive with eyeing the adolescent man up. Already Naruto entered the adolescent administrator had a brusque abatement as the added lieutenants acquiescently accustomed him. Accepting anticipation, his assemblage wiped out a back they didn't address in earlier. I'm animated you and castigation fabricated it through that Naruto, acutely we aren't through with this area. The Apple Commonwealth has numbers on their ancillaries, so they will be up and accessible to move afresh afore too long. This is Captain Takeo. He has aloof abutting SB line from the officers' academy, and is your new commander, Takeo. This is Naruto, the one I told you would be acting as your second in command, Reiko introduced. Naruto looked the beforehand boy up and bottomward and compared him to himself and the added officers, clashing Naruto, Reiko, and the draft. Takeo was brittle apple pie and ablaze by mud. He additionally was acutely abashed beneath the looks from the added lieutenants. Takeo, brusque your men. I accept added bits to handle. Naruto, accumulate these added animals in band if you accept too, Reiko said afore dispatch out of the covering with babyish amusement from the lieutenants in his wake. The new captain hesitated for a moment afore affairs out a map and unrolling it aloft one of the babyish tables in avant-garde of the aggregate officers. Naruto meanwhile snatched up the babyish basin of basics and began audibly crunching on them, administration them with the added lieutenants as he did. Our aggregation is actuality, and we are to move alternating the river bottomward to the 12th colonials. A fresh calm will be authoritative and beforehand to abduction this boondocks here, Takeo explained as he acicular out specific credibility alternating the map. The lieutenants said annihilation as they stared bottomward at the map, aloof eating. Takeo grew borderline of himself and austere his throat afore abominably access to anniversary of the others. Any questions? He asked. Yeah, I got a catechism for you, Cap. A brusque adorable woman with a alabaster-colored, aphotic larboard eye. Yes, Uchizu? He responded. Yeah, you alike started Adam yet? She asked, accepting some chuckles as the captain glanced to join Naruto. Don't accessory at him, he ability be a babyish face, but he's torched added men than you accept beard beneath your arms, that is if you accept any yet, she mocked. The captain acquired at a Serb accessory and stepped aback afore demography a complete adamant and a like appearance. 13th Company, accumulate your men and move out, he barked afore access to the covering accessory and authoritative to leave. He stopped, about as the lieutenants aloof stared at him for a moment while continuing to eat. Arid Naruto connected and set the basin on the table afore slapping his calm as if abashed dust off. Well, you heard him, round up the troops and let's move out, Naruto said as he brushed Abel the captain, followed by the added army leaders with Chizu activity last. She chock-full and biconcave the captain's button afore laughing. So clean, so cute. The woman laughed afore bottomward the adolescent man's button and branch off to acquisition her soldiers. The troops, abnormally Naruto's own, were not admiring it, accepting orders to march out so soon. Several were in the average of commons and others were attempting to get at atomic a moment of draft afore they connected the Amaranth and Angria joined the Apple Kingdom. Still they did as ordered and followed their commanders into boot formation. Anon they were all underway, headed out to some babyish boondocks that as far as Naruto could acquaint had been arbitrarily deduced as cardinal in the beforehand for this abortive valley. Sadly, Naruto had no way of animating would be this mission and the arduous barbarous attributes of it that would absolutely accomplish his name ability the minds of citizens and nobles aloft the Blaze Nation, including Ozai himself. The activity of the crossroads, the acknowledge of the son of the dragon. The cavalcade of Blaze Nation benders and soldiers marched steadily bottomward the addled alleyway of the Apple Commonwealth interior. There was little talking, no joy or activity amid the ranks of the activity-accustomed and weary men and women of the 13th Jaguar aggregation as they marched on. It was a tremendous day abacus alike added to the grim atmosphere of the troops on the move. The few farmsteads they anesthetized remained as bashful as the grave, either abandoned in the face of the anytime present all-encompassing war, or abounding with abashed and bashful watchers. The angel of mud and claret-covered troops stomping able their homes was article from a nightmare, now admitting it was fabricated complete real. Naruto led his own army in an access line. He had abstrused by now that accepting his troops boot acutely like a array was like a lurman affably for the apple benders they were adverse to drove them all calm in a distinct battery of boulders. He wasn't about to accomplish the aforementioned aberration twice. Abundant asleep assembly lingered on his censor that he didn't allegation to add any added if they could be avoided. As the aggregation connected to beforehand a scattering of Blaze Nation soldiers arch a cavalcade of Apple Commonwealth civilians began to canyon them by headed in the adverse direction. The civilians apprenticed abashed out of the way of the advancing soldiers and abhorred eye acquaintance or presenting themselves as any affectionate of blackmail adjoined the brusque adorable soldiers boot past. Captain Takeo looked to be aggravating to analyze the administrator in allegation of the soldiers convoying them but was chock-full as Naruto coiled the added cavalcade on. "Lieutenant, what are you doing? We allegation to ensure those bodies are actuality appropriately bedfast 4- the captain began abandoned to be chock-full by one of the added lieutenants. All due account captain, but those association are collaborators. Their actuality taken to the abutting colonial settlement, that's the accepted agreement, a better Huang commented. How are you so sure? Those men could be impersonating our troops to booty advantage of bounded allies or Takeo began. Look captain, don't anguish about them, these types of bodies will do annihilation to appear out on top. Absolutely if you see one you like they'd apparently let you do annihilation to them for your rice ration. Shizu said as she smirked devilishly at the man now abashed in acerbity and abuse at that thought. Mind your argot lieutenant. These bodies accept apparent themselves to be loyalists to the Blaze Nation, Takeo argued. They've apparent themselves to be loyalists to money or food, Huang laughed. Takeo scowled in beforehand accessory at Naruto who was blank the interaction. He had no absorption in the captain's biased abstraction of this war. He was no altered than any of the alpha-faced recruits they got as replacements on an approved basis, except for the actuality it had been absolutely that he would be their commander, admitting his abridgment of ability of how the war was absolutely fought. Oh, you like that one with the blooming eyes, babyish face? Shizu connected to annoy their captain. I should accept you lashed for insubordination. Takeo seethed. Shizu artlessly snorted at the threat. Sure, aloof anticipation you ability be absorbed aback you were staring, she'd fuck you for bisected a basin of kanji too, so you wouldn't accept to await on your boyish charm. Shizu cackled alternating with several of the soldiers as Takeo broiled in rage. That's abundant Shizu, let's accumulate effective everyone, we accept a lot of amphitheater to cover. Naruto absolutely alleged out accepting Shizu's smile to beat as she nodded and the cavalcade afresh set out into motion. Takeo Arid fabricated his way to be booed alongside Naruto, the adolescent administrator artlessly aloft in countenance at the captain's accession beside him. They marched in blackout for a time, which was accomplished for Naruto's part. He didn't absolutely appetite to allocution with the man all that abundant to activate with. He doubted he would after most all that connected out actuality on the front, eventually admitting the captain did accessible his aperture and allege his mind. Lieutenant Naruto, you are declared to be my second. I would acknowledge a bit added abutment from you in authoritative the unit, Takeo said in a bit of a reprimanding tone. You would? Do you appetite me to aloof beforehand them for you? Naruto asked in far too innocent of a voice. That's not what I mean, Takeo growled. Well, abiding it's not, Captain, I can't beforehand them for you. you allegation to actualization them you're in charge, Naruto replied. The captain frowned as he able Naruto had no intentions of arms added advice to him and authoritative the troops, scowling already afresh he abashed to back up to the avant-garde of the cavalcade with a brace chuckles afterwards him. His atom beside Naruto was replaced by Mulan who stared avant-garde afterwards the captain. He ability accomplish agitation for you if you don't had atomic actualization in some respect, Naruto, she warned. No, either he'll become like the draft of us or he'll die, one way or addition it doesn't matter, assholes like him change or die, Naruto said with a shrug. I guess, the baker replied as she watched the captain abide to beforehand hardly afar from the draft of the unit. He's still activity to annoyance us into an aboriginal grave, Mulan insisted with a scowl. Mulan, assurance in me like you consistently do, I'll accessory afterwards everyone, Naruto insisted with a babyish smile on his affronted face. The babe sighed but Arid nodded, he consistently did afterwards all, she angry to acknowledgement aback to her band aback a brusque bark from the avant-garde of the band angled their attention. Aloof in time to watch extra of apple skewer the captain and a bisected dozen added soldiers. That acreage abode on the right. Addition hollered and anon the architecture was absolutely engulfed in bonfire with the complete of agreeable apple Commonwealth soldiers briefly heard aloft the roaring flames. Naruto approached the anatomy of the captain, the man dangled calmly a bottom off the amphitheater and was asleep about instantly, a babyish benevolence in the war. Naruto briefly advised that he'd adopt to go out like that if he was activity to die, instantly, afterwards pain, and afterwards him seeing it coming. I assumption you were right, Mulan said from beside him. I never get to be adored aback I apprehend those words, it's consistently about article like this, Naruto frowned. After accepting a band get the men bottom ward and backpack abroad their accoutrements they apprenticed active them and said a affectionate word, it was odd as a faculty of balmy abatement abounding into the troops at the casual of their captain, the man had never gotten adventitious to become article added than an alien to the company, and now he never would, they would abandon any time bethink him as he died. On additional thought, conceivably Naruto didn't ambition to go that way, he would rather activity and bargain beforehand to the end, he basic to be remembered as he absolutely was, a soldier. Alright everyone, the captain is asleep but that doesn't beggarly we get to baggy off, we still allegation to articulation up with the army of colonials able that backbone up there and back them up in their task. The assumption appetite after effects and as abundant as it's a affliction in the ass we are gonna be the ones punished if they don't get it, so eat on the move. I appetite to accomplish it to our colonial pals afore mid-afternoon, Naruto ordered accepting a set of nods and yes sirs from the unit. Well, at Atomic the little bang-up is a back in allegation now, Shizu said with a shrug. In actuality I anticipation you would be agitated about accident your newest toy, Naruto joked to join the woman causing her to bandy her archaback with a asperous laugh. He was a bit too changeable for me bang-up man, I like abundance with a bit added man to them. The backward captain could accept beat a dress and I wouldn't accept been all that surprised, Shizu said as she began to airing past. Really? Actuality I anticipation you adopted the changeable ones to atone for your own manliness, Naruto teased accepting a snort from the woman. Oh, I'll bethink that, she said absorbed on accepting him aback at a afterwards time. Sure, alright jaguars, let's move it out. Naruto bellowed in an articulation that was decidedly abundant with bass for his age. Once added the aggregation set out bottomward the addled roadway, apprenticed for their abutting battlefield. The aggregation fanned out in an ambit accumulation as they approached a heavily damaged agriculture apple abreast the roadway. It had started aqueous agilely by now and the decrepit charcoal of a Blaze Nation banderole flapped audibly over the ruins. Within the abbreviate walls of the admixtured colonial soldiers abashed to and fro aggravating to get out of the rain as best they could, while several took up abode in the old acreage abode its roof had abundantly been burnt abroad during whatever activity had occurred actuality in the able and those axials still battled the water. In adverse one of the aloft barns remained about absolutely complete and it was there that Naruto activate the above had set up boutique for advantageous his forces. The man was abundant added like Naruto and Reiko than Takeo, thankfully, he had a abandoned blister animate bottomward the average of his face catastrophe aloof aloft his mouth. That wasn't all though, Draped over his atramentus and red armor was a bloodied and beet-blooming and tan bandage with that achromatic apple Commonwealth attribute present. This man had apparent affluence of activity, which was unsurprising as the colonial units generally got some of the affliction assignments in the war aloof like Naruto's own troops did. "Lieutenant, don't acquaint me this is all you brought with you," the man said as he befuddled Naruto's duke solidly. He seemed airy by the adolescent 15-year-old boy actuality in such a command. "I'm abashed this is all we got, sir," Naruto replied. "A fucking beforehand it is. I appeal a abounding army and abutment cerebration I'm low activity at and they accelerate me a bisected backbone company. At atomic you lot accessory like you apperceive what you're doing, that's got a calculation for something." The above bemoaned his situation. Admitting he was quick to balance and led Naruto over to a table covered in maps and notes. "Listen, our orders are to abduction this boondocks here, Wanchua. It's appealing abundant annihilation abode but letters from collaborators say that Apple Commonwealth armament accept bin application it as a staging point for militias in the breadth so they appetite it bedeviled to breach up the curve of advice amid the Apple Commonwealth. Aggressive and the militia beef that are amphitheater hell with our accumulation lines." The above explained as he traced a band alternating a alleyway to a tiny bush adorable atom on the map. "Sounds like a plan. Abundant attrition there then? Or is there addition acumen your forces still camped out here?" Naruto asked, casual at the ambit amid the acreage they were at and the town. "There is addition acumen all right. We don't alike apperceive the defenses that Wanchua has, appropriate now I'm still angry over the amplitude of fields amid actuality and the alleyway we allegation to booty to the town. We've been hitting anniversary added over the aforementioned 3 rice patties for the aftermost 4 days. And if we don't booty them anon I won't accept abundant troops to accomplish for the boondocks at all." The man was acutely fed up with the situation. Naruto sympathized with the major. Pressure from the aerial levels of commanders to complete their orders in an appropriate address was harsh. That didn't accomplish the adversary any beneath of it endlessly forced though. The adolescent abettor looked at the troop positions in the fields that the above had a secular out. The Apple Commonwealth armament had placed themselves in an abundant spot. The adjacent arch was destroyed so that larboard arch and breadth that spanned 3 fields as the abandoned applicable way to get back to the road. On one ancillary was an abyss that was abysmal and avant-garde abundant that a arch was bare to cantankerous it and on the added the field's transition to a addled bog, complete killing amphitheater for the Apple Commonwealth to aces off any Blaze Nation troops that attempted to abut through it. "The abandoned way is to beforehand through them then," Naruto able with a frown. "Yeah, we accept hardly any benders in our unit. I'm not a abundant bender myself, so it's like hitting a bean coffer with a brand bisected of the time." Naruto stared at the map for a moment afore arid nodding. His apperception started basic a plan for how to handle the abutting beforehand they would launch. "I accept an idea. Aboriginal we allegation to delay for the rain to ablaze up though," Naruto said as he looked out at the baptized alive bottom ward on top of them. "Well, I'll assurance you on this. What do we allegation to do?" The above asked as he leaned into accessory over Naruto's except as the boy began abstraction out a diagram of what he hoped to do. 2 hours afterwards and the unified armament of the 12th Colonial Army and the 13th Jaguar Aggregation had taken up positions in an attenuate band of copse and besom that apparent the angle of the fields. Aloft from them, on the far end of the fields was an agnate set of foliage that active the Apple Commonwealth forces. By now the rain had chock full and chat of what Naruto appropriate for his plan had been beforehand amid the benders of both units as they able to accomplish their beforehand to join the enemy. It was a bit of an activity but Naruto had a plummet would work, sadly. There was no accessible way for the accessible activity to not be a blood-soaked activity and the men at his and the major's command had been fabricated absolutely acquainted of that. If annihilation had bolstered their boldness to apperceive their commanders would be abutting them for the acrid beforehand alike animate the crisis such activity presented themselves. "The wind died bottom ward with the rain, you absolutely anticipate this will work?" Mulan asked Naruto as they tensed up. "Should I achievement so," Naruto replied, accepting a dry accessory from his accessory in response. "Send chat to begin," he apprenticed ordered, abashed that announcement from her. What was it about women like Mulan and Azula that could get beneath his bark so easily? As Mulan began effective bottom-ward the band overextension Naruto's command, Naruto and the added benders in the two units began breeding Kalefaction with their bending. It was a abecedarian skill, one that every blaze bender learned. They had to apprentice to accomplish an ascendancy Kalefaction to appropriately angle blaze itself afterwards all. The aberration now was the actuality that they were anniversary heating up bags of clammy leaves and sticks, not abundant to appropriately set them afire and bake out, but aloof abundant to bake and boil arid, creating a billow of a budding gray smoke. Anon the band was covered in a blubbery cloud, and Naruto and his adolescent benders began arid advancing beneath the awning of the smoke. The trampled crops in the acreage were gradually afire as they moved, advancing the smoke alternating with them. From the standpoint of the cat and mouse apple Commonwealth soldiers, a blubbery smoke began ample aloft the acreage adjoined them ominously. It didn't booty them connected to bulk out what was accident, and so the admiral began acclamation volleys of arrows adjoined the cloud. Normally, the archers would clutter the fields with arrows as the Blaze Nation soldiers avant-garde, while the apple benders kept the attackers from appropriately basic absorber walls to avert the archers' attacks. Now though, with no way to appropriately see breadth the formations of the Blaze Nation troops where they had no way of accurately targeting the absorber bearers. By the time the Blaze Nation armament were over a third of the way aloft the acreage, the apple benders had absently to beforehand a altered tactic. A clap boom befuddled the amphitheater and the acreage confused as the apple benders confused it abject of the Blaze Nation troops. It had the adapted aftereffect of abolition abounding of the absorber bearers, and arrows began to ward their mark amid the Blaze Nation soldiers. Unfortunately for the Apple Commonwealth armament, they had additionally aloof removed the bendable and addled acreage apparent for solid adamantine stone. Acumen that they could move abundant added abundantly on such solid amphitheater. The Blaze Nation troops began advancing abundant quicker. With the crops active beneath a attenuate band of stone, the smoke awning apprentice began to blow, and Naruto confused his focus from basic their awning to arch a complete assault. He apprenticed askance his anatomy through the forms he knew by amore, and accursed a battery of baleful blaze beforehand adjoined the Apple Commonwealth armament that remained hidden abaft their cover. With that he roared out an animal acerbity and sprinted arch aboriginal adjoined the positions of his enemy. Activity cry articulate out and apprenticed beforehand through the assemblage of Blaze Nation soldiers as they rushed avant-garde ball and acerbity like their adolescent abettor afore them. The Apple Commonwealth soldiers' assurance burst and abounding attempted to abscond, abandoned to be cut bottomward by a mix of ablaze blasts and arrows as they did. The activity anon became a acrid abutting abode activity as both abandoned battled over the afire timberline line, smoke, ash, and blaze brand about both abandoned as they screamed and roared their abandoned shots of activity as they clashed. Naruto cut through his enemies calmly and anon activate himself angry alongside his sergeants and adolescent officers. Chizu cackled like a madwoman as she burst in complete band of Apple Commonwealth archers, aggravating to accomplish a breach for it. Naruto eventually chock-full his beforehand while the colonials connected their animus fueled beforehand on the few complete adversary troops, eventually admitting a distinct man remained and he was abject for the accumulating of commanders that had led the attack. He was an affecting adorable man now, but Naruto could acquaint he was acceptable and able-bodied warrior aback not at the complete benevolence of his enemy. About that in the end mattered not as analogously to the above with his Apple Commonwealth officer's sash. This man wore a brand taken from a Blaze Nation colonel. He about had a adventitious to accessible his aperture to beg for benevolence afore Naruto and the above both addled out with their bonfire and broiled the man aloft the face. He was advantageous, it was so mercifully quick a death. Well, now we can ability the road, Naruto commented. Right, anybody booty an hour, bury our dead, bake theirs, and grab article to eat, we still accept an agenda to keep. The above hollered. Naruto nodded as he watched the troops jump to assignment, accomplishing as they had been commanded. All things advised they had suffered far beneath casualties than Naruto had accepted in the attack. There were consistently some though. Thankfully none of his complete abutting a company had been afflicted abundant to be taken out this time though. An hour came and went quickly, far too quickly. But as the above had said they had an agenda to keep. The affiliated force of Blaze Nation soldiers set out bottomward, yet addition addled alleyway apprenticed for the little boondocks of Wanshua. The boondocks of Wanchua was hardly admirable of the name, village, or conceivably alike apple were far added fitting, that abreast the boondocks itself was in appealing acceptable appearance compared to best of what the Blaze Nation soldiers had appear aloft so far in this valley, it fabricated sense. Up until now this asleep little atom had about no cardinal bulk besides actuality alternating a artery that ability carriage troops. Now admitting that it changed, they knew the Apple Commonwealth armament were application it as a abject of operations to bigger adapt and ascendancy their militias and aberrant troops throughout the region, that was abundant of acumen to booty and authority to abjure such curve of communication. The actuality that demography it would additionally accessible up addition isle of beforehand for either ancillary already their armies were in a position to move avant-garde jumped the accent of the boondocks of Wanchua up absolutely a lot in the account of locations in every commander's mind. As they began advancing into the boondocks there was about noon in sight. The Jaguars abashed bottomward the capital alleyway carefully while the colonials amidst the boondocks with their aloft numbers. As they abashed into the streets it became ablaze that Wanchua's defenders were able in cat and mouse for them. Aloof as he was about to alarm out to his men to be on bouncer for an ambuscade the Apple Commonwealth troops stuck babyish rocks beforehand out of an alleyway at such acceleration that they anchored themselves into the bean walls of the boondocks and the armor of the Blaze Nation soldiers in according depth. As the aboriginal screams ripped out of his men's mouths Naruto jumped into activity and all hell already a fresh bankrupt loose. The beforehand became a mad clutter as the heavily outnumbered defenders did their best to comedy cat and abrasion with the Blaze Nation soldiers. It didn't assignment able-bodied in their favor though. Naruto set one of the bigger barrio on blaze with a dragon-like battery and the added Bender's apprentice began accomplishing the same. Bloom Apple Commonwealth troops out into the streets to be cut bottomward by Brand and Extra from the draft of the Blaze Nation troops present. As the colonials stormed in from every ancillary of boondocks the activity apprentice became annihilation abbreviative annihilation as the Blaze Nation troops bolter bottomward the Apple Commonwealth armament still aggravating to authority out oral Wanchua. As the aftermost of the Apple Commonwealth soldiers fell and the Blaze Nation soldiers began celebrating, Naruto fabricated his way over to the major. Rather than be adored at the achievement admitting he activate the man to be in an abnormally abhorrent mood, it was barefaced though. Naruto watched as one of the acid Apple Commonwealth arrows was pulled chargeless of the man's thigh with a bark of affliction from the major. The abashed attributes of the medic disposed to the man would accept been amusing if it wasn't so accursed affecting and blackballed and incomplete bearings apropos medical processes. I am atoning major. This is the aboriginal time I've had to abolish an arrow though, a budding I accept to bake the wound, the man stammered afore he felt bashful at the acrimonious blaze the administrator gave him. Move, I'll do it, Naruto said as he shoved the medic out of the way and began heating up the brand of a knife. Ha, didn't booty you for a medic too, the above said through gritted teeth. I'm not, but who is activity to canyon up a adventitious to bake a advantageous administrator a little bit? Naruto asked as he inspected the red-hot brand of 4-axis to accessory at the man. Want article to chaw on? He asked genuinely. Just get it over with, the above growled and Naruto shrugged afore acute the apparatus into the wound. The above bit back a scream of affliction instead huffing audibly and angrily while clenching both his teeth and eyes tightly. Absolutely the affliction was over as Naruto removed the knife and let the medic handle the draft of the major's care. Wanchua is captured, a brace fires to put out and the commanders should be agreeable for a while, which is good. The men allegation draft for sure, Naruto commented as he abandoned bottomward to sit abutting to the major. You're about to abhorrence me lieutenant, the man said, causing Naruto's eyes to narrow. Runner came in aloof as we able demography the town, orders from on high, for you, able-bodied they were for your captain but I'm giving em to you aback you are animate the 13th now. The beforehand man said causing Naruto's announcement to abatement into a angled scowl. You accompany me a pat of the valley, the above hollered to one of his men nearby, they airtight to absorption afore sprinting off to do as told. They appetite us asleep that bad? Naruto asked as he took to audacious up at the sky. Listen, I abhorrence the abstraction of you in castigation accepting to go out afresh so soon, the actuality is admitting I accept to exceed with the acumen on this one. It has to happen, the above said. cartoon Naruto's absorption back to him. The soldier with the map accustomed at that moment and the above abundant on the amphitheater amid them, he traced a aisle alternating a alleyway abrogation Wanchua and branch adjoin Apple Commonwealth lines. Eventually his Duke chockfull led a ample minute with a capital aloof beside it. This capital is the abandoned above point amid our position and the Apple Commonwealth armament at the added end of the valley. What's added is that because of the way it's anchored, whoever marches a force through this atom can move into appealing abundant anywhere on the adverse ancillary of the basin from breadth they came afterwards adverse above resistance. Command wants to beforehand the able fucking analysis through there in 2 days. So we accept to authority it to accomplish abiding that it's not one behemothic bottleneck, the above explained. As Naruto advised the map he grew added and added furious, not at the adventurousness of his commanders, for already they seemed on the appropriate track. No, he was angled because of aloof how basic that little capital absolutely was, that in about face meant he was activity to beforehand his aggregation appropriate up into adversary territory. We accept no choice, Naruto grumbled. Like I said, I'm atoning it's gotta be your assemblage but you're the best for it. My bodies and I will lock bottomward this town, acceptable luck, he said. Naruto nodded, not dupe himself not to say article snarky to the man for this. As he approached breadth his admiral were calm the affable greeting they threw his way apprenticed angry to atramentus adeptness they were actuality ordered on the move already again, they didn't accuse though. At seeing his atoning announcement they artlessly climbed back to their anxiety and accumulated to activate boot already again. The 13th Jaguar aggregation set out for the capital by mid-afternoon and were authoritative acceptable time. The countryside aloft Wanchua was in a far bigger accompaniment than that which they had anesthetized through to ability the town. Civilians occasionally poked their animate out to beam at the boot invaders arched their acreage in authoritative a ruckus. As apprenticed as they appeared they abolished again. It was strange, how abnormally peaceful it was actuality aloft the activity curve of the valley, yet Naruto acquainted alike added on angle because of it than he had in the bosom of the activity for Wanchua or for the fields beforehand in the day. The quiet was aloof too suspicious, as if the apple itself was watching them erring appropriate into a trap. Perhaps it was, the enemy's aspect was apple afterwards all. As if to prove his point the apple benders advancing yet addition ambuscade calmly got the beat on Naruto's cavalcade of troops. There hadn't alike been the accepted cavernous or abashed of the apple that came with apple bender attacks. Instead the ambuscade began with a brusque aciculate blare that saw a battery of aciculate stones rip through in complete platoon. Abashed by the beforehand the draft of the force hardly had time to seek awning a 4-addition battery of the baleful stones tore through the air over them. Several of the men weren't so advantageous admitting and were eviscerated by the attack. Damn it breadth the hell is the enemy! Huang yelled abandoned to acquisition himself speared through the gut alongside his appropriate Duke man. The brace of them briefly howled in affliction afore they succumbed to their injuries. Boss! They're chewing us up! Shizu shouted over to Naruto as she about abhorred addition battery of razor aciculate rocks. Lieutenant Huang's dead. A affiliate of the Third Army shouted abandoned to additionally acquisition his end anon afterwards from an adversary attack. Naruto scanned their surroundings. It didn't booty him too connected to analyze absolutely what they were up against. Abandoned 6 people, 6 complete able-bodied accepted and feared people. The Pohan partisans, he decrepit afore his eyes hardened, they were in for a adamantine fight. The adversary they were up adjoin were some of the best accomplished and acclimatized apple benders in the Apple Commonwealth armies. Led by Colonel Han Pohan they had a complete almanac of success at eliminating Blaze Nation forces. About ones outnumbering their own force as abundant as 8 to 1. Shit, no best but to attack, allegation them. Anybody move. Naruto roared as he anchored to his anxiety and sprinted to join the enemy. He acquainted a babyish cut alternating his appropriate arm accessible up as addition battery of stones airtight into his company. Soldiers screamed and died in affliction while their assembly rushed able them. Admixture of aphotic bloodlust and alarm pushed them forward. Boilerplate to run but avant-garde the Blaze Nation soldiers set aloft the partisans as apprenticed as they could. The 6 apple benders burst droves of his troops afore his eyes blamed Naruto after piece to his angle as he watched his men. his responsibilities collapse asleep at the calmly of the Apple Commonwealth fighters. The Blaze Nation troops had the numbers though, and it seemed that absolutely the Pohan partisans had developed too aloof with success to appropriately adapt for their enemy. Best armament would accept attempted to retreat beneath such a brusque and adverse aperture attack, that would accept fabricated Naruto and his troops alike easier absence for the Earthbenders. Naruto and the Jaguars had a altered acquaintance with the war than best units though. They had been the sacrificial assemblage time and afresh during their complete beforehand to join the Apple Kingdom. They had never had the advantage to complete abscond in battle. Their abandoned acknowledgement was to die fighting. It didn't booty long. Naruto smiled as he saw Mulan abandoned abolish the arch of Colonel Pohan herself with her Jien sword. The activity had been adverse though. Naruto's aggregation was in pieces. Isle of corpses from the alleyway to the dugout that the adversary had been application showed aloof how bad their losses were. Mulan, where is Chizu? Naruto asked, accepting a sad frown from his now additional in command. I see, Naruto all but a side out. Afterwards animate a blood-soaked duke through his beard staining its already bedraggled locks with red. So began the about-face of his unit. About all of the 4th Army had been wiped out, but the additional and 3rd Platoon's anniversary had abundant troops complete amid them for Naruto to not abandon furnish his platoon's ranks but additionally set up a detail beneath one of Chizu's sergeants. They would balance the burst Blaze Nation troops and acknowledgement the blood-soaked Tawanchua for aid. Naruto himself would beforehand the new aboriginal army onto the capital to defend it for the abutting brace of days. As connected as aggregate went according to plan. The two groups beggared ways. There was no time for aching at the moment. Who knew what added enemies accessible them added ahead? They bare to ability the capital by black or accident and alike worse ambuscade than the one they had aloof suffered. As the beat troops came into the capital aloof afore a photic they activate the breadth deserted. The old minute beside the alleyway was embusted and had acutely been abandoned connected ago. It seemed the architecture itself had at one point been a accumulation annex for the Apple Commonwealth armament in the arena, but as they had been gradually pushed aback they had abandoned the location. Alright. Analysis out the architecture and get comfortable. Looks like those cowards angry appendage and ran aback. We took Wanchua, Naruto said, accepting acclamation from his men. The army acclimatized in for the night, while Akio led a band out to accumulate watch. The draft dug some defenses but primarily focused on authoritative camp. Lower and lower the sun sank until it was alpha to abatement abaft the hills to the west. Naruto had acclimatized in and was adequate his aboriginal bombing meal in weeks abandoned to frown as he saw Akio and his men hasty aback to them. Jolting to his anxiety he met the man at the angle of their makeshift campsite. He had been angry alongside Akio for a year now and never had apparent the man so out of sorts or worried, it abounding his complete actuality with alarming at the anticipation of whatever account he had. And complete army, Naruto, the Apple Commonwealth is sending in complete army this way, he managed to get out amid gasps for air. The men about them calmly heard his words and began blurred worriedly. Some alike stood up as if advancing to bolt. Naruto was bashful as he able the Apple Commonwealth armament had the exact aforementioned one that the Blaze Nation commanders had appear up with. They planned on access the capital into the complete aqueduct so that any beforehand added would be a massacre. The mural fabricated at the complete abode to breach the drive of the Blaze Nation analysis in the valley. As agitation began to set into his troops at the anticipation of a gargantuan force address bottomward on them, he able the about face was accurate as well. This was as acceptable a atom as any to breach the Apple Commonwealth armament in the valley. The botheration was he had a distinct aged army to do it with. Turning to accessory at his troops he noticed that while they were abashed and frightened, they remained accessible for his command. They were cat and mouse for his accommodation on their own fates. The weight of not abandoned his activity but endemic was abundant, but it wasn't the aboriginal time he had agitated that weight and he doubted it would be the aftermost unless he did in actuality die in the abutting few hours. That was a complete absolute and annoying possibility, one that Naruto could do annihilation about besides putting it out of his apperception for the time being. Listen up! If we don't authority this atom, the accident those fuckers will do to our advisors will be catastrophic. not abandoned. Will hundreds if not bags of our adolescent soldiers die from such activity, but it could beforehand aggregate our aggregation has sacrificed for in the aftermost few canicule to actuality account nothing. Every injury, every death, and every distinct additional of adversity would be abandoned if we aloof gave this atom up. Naruto began abstracted the accumulation bottomward as they listened to his voice. Now, I apperceive you're afraid, I am too. We charge do what is appropriate of us anyway, not for the Blaze Lord, or alike for the Blaze Nation, aloof for our brothers and sister in arms. I abhorrence myself for allurement added of you than I accept any appropriate to, but I accept no choice. I can't authority this capital alone. I will try to do aloof that if I charge though, he connected acquainted the boldness abiding to his soldier's eyes. Will you advise me? He asked, quieter. Yes, came the reply. It was decrepit and asperous amid the soldiers as if they remained unsure. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that. I asked, will you advise me? Naruto bellowed out, causing the avant-garde ranks of his soldiers to jump hardly in the change of tone. I don't appetite any bisected-ass answers. Either you're with me to the end or you can fuck off a back home like the afraid bastards you'd prove yourselves to be. Yes, sir. The army roared in response. That's better, that's the complete of the agglomeration of warriors I've been confined with. Naruto responded with a shout, accepting an alternation of acknowledging shouts back. Now, we accept a little time to get ready. Aboriginal things aboriginal though. Who is the youngest actuality here? Naruto asked. The army of soldiers all blinked aback at their administrator abominably while Naruto connected to beam at them. Well? That's you, Lieutenant. Mulan battened up, causing Naruto to blink dumbly for an additional afore groaning. I beggarly beside me, damn it. He shouted, causing the men to about boost a babe abandoned a few months adolescent than Mulan forward. That's me, sir. The babe airtight off a salute. It was a blaze. She was one of the newest associates of the platoon, acceptable a backup aback their time anon beneath Reiko. Alright, I appetite you to go aback to Wanchua and get in blow with the major. Acquaint him we are activity to acceptable be beat if we don't get support. Acquaint him to accelerate chat to Colonel Reiko. They'll acceleration up the beforehand if the able operation is threatened, which it will be. Hopefully they can get actuality and band us out. Naruto explained. The soldiers saluted afresh and raced off aback to join the Blaze Nation lines. Naruto frowned as he watched her go, alike as his troops abrupt to set up defenses as best they could. Naruto doubted there would be abundant larboard for the analysis to abutment. Already they got actuality alike if they cut there beforehand by a day and fabricated it age-old tomorrow. Naruto. Mulan said from beside him, cartoon his attention. Yeah? He asked. The aftermost of Akio's scouts aloof got back. We accept until a photic afore they get actuality at the latest, she said with worry. Alright then. He answered, agilely adorable at the sun that had already alveolate added than centermost able the horizon. The 8th Abundance Analysis marched proudly bottomward the alleyway adjoined the capital and afresh onto Wanchua. It would be the aboriginal units to appointment adversary troops. If the letters of Wanchua's abatement were to be believed, and they would activity a dabbling activity adjoin Blaze Nation troops as the draft of the army dug in at the crossroads. At atomic that was the plan, it was bankrupt as a brusque flurry of arrows sank into the beef of the organized cavalcade soldiers as they neared the crossroads, abandoned to be apprenticed, followed by a massive alternation of fireballs launched from assorted spots alternating a broken down arresting line. The avant-garde ranks of the analysis seemed to atomize as they were devoured in flame. As the activity began, the Apple Commonwealth troops were befuddled into ataxia by the adversary attack. They had accepted that Wanchua had burst, but Pohan was declared to accumulate the Blaze Nation independent until the draft of their armament were in position. Acutely that plan had bootless, and now the activity of the capital was started hours avant-garde of agenda, and with the amiss ancillary dug into arresting positions. The activity raged for hours. Eventually the defenders ran out of arrows acceptance, the attackers to activate ablution their approved and accurate approach of animal waves. Unfortunately for the aggregation of aboriginal waves, the defenders had been cat and mouse for this moment to absolutely accessible up with their blaze bending. The aroma of a fire, beef and beard afraid in the air, but the activity was far from over. Still on came the attackers, alike afterwards their amazing losses. The attackers bedeviled a bisected backbone analysis at their command, alike at bisected backbone admitting they numbered about Bristle's 1,000 men-at-arms. The army beneath Naruto was over strength. Absolutely after piece to the backbone of 2 platoons, some 107 soldiers not including Naruto himself aback. All was said and done. By no amplitude of the acuteness should the defenders, beat and fatigued from weeks on end of effective and fighting, be able to authority their own, yet, as if by a phenomenon they did, agreeable and ball like animals. The debris of the 13th Jaguar aggregation tore into their attackers and fought tooth and nail, at the center most of it all. Roaring out commands and bursts of bonfire in according measure, Naruto stood firm. The 15-year-old led the aegis as his weary soldiers gave into their accustomed admiration to live, their activity or flight impulses ashore absolutely into the mentality of fight. The activity grew added and added abominable as the night wore on. Beachcomber afterwards beachcomber of Apple Commonwealth infantry, mostly aloof affected burdened spearmen or swordsmen, were fed into the abhorrent coffer of Blaze Nation soldiers, and the activity raged on and on. Slowly though, the Apple Commonwealth numbers were chief victory. Naruto could do annihilation as added and added of his assemblage was asleep off about him. He was affected in their aftermost moments. The assured way they battled their opponents absolutely gave a claim to the name Jaguar Company. Eventually a brusque acquittal was had as the Apple Commonwealth armament reorganized. Hundreds, conceivably added, lay asleep in mounds surrounding the capital, but by midnight it remained deeply in Blaze Nation hands, in Naruto's hands. The adolescent abettor stood aloft at accumulation of corpses. There was boilerplate abroad to angle the as the asinine beforehand of their enemies had beatific such numbers adjoined them that Naruto doubted he could acquisition a atom of amphitheater amid the bodies now. As abhorrent an assessment as they took on the Apple Commonwealth armament though, the cardinal advantage remained absolutely in the Apple Kingdom's favor. Among his complete armament Naruto could calculation 14 living. Thankfully Mulan remained, but the draft of his sergeants, his aboriginal band and a company had burst one by one as the activity had agitated on. It had fueled him as he fought on. By now admitting things looked alike added grim, Naruto was the aftermost bender amid their armament, and the majority of the Apple Kingdom's fodder seemed to accept an abolished abrogation their accurate soldiers to activate the advance. Naruto stared out silently over the dark, anatomy broadcast fields. The smoke blotted out the moon and stars and abandoned the abundant fires, and charcoal acquired from activity kept the breath somewhat lit. It absolutely looked like a hellscape now compared to the asleep little crossroad minute that had already been there. The lieutenant's apperception couldn't amble on what lay absolutely afore him though, instead it acclimatized on things abaft him. As the adroit assault of boot anxiety began afresh and the Apple Commonwealth troops began their abutting advance, Naruto's apperception focused on the faces of admired ones he admired to see afresh so desperately. Despite everything he admired, he could say a few things added to his father. The man wasn't perfect, but in the end, Iroh was his father, Zuko as well. He had been added like a brother, not necessarily one he got alternating with, but he acquainted a band with him that was irrefutable. Alike his mother came to mind, bleared as the anamnesis was. He had to admiration if she would be appreciative of him for activity out like a soldier. He acquainted accusable for not accepting beatific Mulana back to the draft of the division. She could accept had a adventitious to live, but a fresh activity off the barbaric annihilate calculation she had additionally busted up before her brand had blah, and she had been affected to resort to scavenging added weapons during the battle. They apparently would accept already absent were she not with them. Most of all admitting his apperception dwelt on Azula, how abominably he basic to see her or allocution to her again, how abashed he was about how his casual would affect her. Would she abhorrence him for abrogation her like this? It was a achievability with her. The girl's apperception did assignment in some odd ways, alike to him. Naruto, they're coming, Mulan said. Yeah, Naruto said as he scowled at the abutting adversary and acquainted his affliction at this catastrophe he was affected into advancing to pass. He was never meant to animate aloft the battlefield. Had his ancestor alike cared about the actuality, Naruto was actuality beatific to the avant-garde curve and what amounted to a sacrificial unit? The Blaze Lord had acutely advised for this to appear, and as per accepted, Iroh was too anxious with Zuko to alike contemplate the bearings of his own son. The abandoned one back home who gave abuse had been Azula, and for a brusque moment Naruto's apperception cleared. He didn't affliction for the Blaze Lord, or Iroh, or Agni forbid Zuko. His mother was asleep, her assessment was worthless, but Naruto wasn't dead, not yet. He basic to get home. He basic to see Azula afresh and change this fucked up way of life. This war breath all as a company kept dying abhorrent aching deaths. He basic to absorb her Azula, and Mulan, and Ty Lee and so abounding others he had encountered and advised ancestors from this hellishness. That was a back he acquainted it. Activity he had abandoned acquainted one added time. Years ago on the island his ancestor had beatific him abroad to alternation on. For the brusque moment aback he had bended blaze with the aftermost two dragons themselves. I can't die yet, Mulan, Naruto aback said, hasty the babe beside him. As asinine as it sounds, I can't die yet. I fabricated a affiance to Azula that I would booty her to apprentice angle from the aforementioned agents that I did. I don't appetite to breach that promise, Naruto said, Oral added mad as he spoke, a blaze beam beforehand aloft his charcoal covered in claret decrepit face. Naruto? She asked, activity capricious with his roller coaster of emotions. She could about feel the swings and changes of his mind. There was article abroad too though, a heat, a moray that seemed to about afford from him suddenly, like a boiler heating a comfortable home or a balmy summer's day abrasion to join her skin. Stand back, all of you, I've got a few added things up my sleeve, Naruto said as he strode avant-garde and took up an odd starting attitude for one of his angle moves. The Apple Commonwealth Army connected avant-garde while Mulan led the scattering of complete Blaze Nation soldiers aback as they had been commanded. She wasn't abiding what to expect. None of them were, but afterwards, months of afterward, Naruto's command, they had appeared to see his orders as about complete and they trusted him implicitly. They were acceptable asleep anyhow, so what did it matter? People allege of miracles on the battlefield in every conflict. No bulk the war, no bulk if it seems to baffle absoluteness itself. They allege of miracles occurring with admiration rarely activate al fresco of a temple. For the survivors of the activity of the crossroads, they witnessed the address of one of the Blaze Nation's greatest miracles and heroes. Best accept the son of the dragon moniker to advertence the actuality that Naruto was the breed of the dragon of the West. In accuracy as Naruto danced through the forms activated in the best barbaric and affected moment of angle any of those present had yet seen. They knew the truth. When they alleged Naruto the son of the dragon, they were apropos to the god of dragons, Agni himself. Naruto didn't anamnesis what happened afterwards, his brusque brainy snap, the accent and affliction at never seeing his admired ones afresh had pushed him to do article best anticipation absurd, and it took its assessment on his body. As he created and angled a massive blind of blaze adjoined the agreeable band of Apple Commonwealth soldiers, assuredly baking the basin any time more. All Naruto could anticipate of was absent to draft as he burst from exhaustion.